I'm good. I'm melting.
It is hot outside. I saw there's like a heat advisory until 8 p.m. today or something
I
like
believe
that.
that was canceled.
Okay.
So
So,
hopefully it won't be
so it's not hot anymore.
dangerously hot, but it's still hot. But I think we have some rain on the way that will cool things down to a calm and cool 85 degrees maybe, which sounds lovely considering what we've been dealing with for the past couple of weeks. Just awful. I
I
don't know
would
how anybody likes this weather.
No, I was at the Sounds game on Sunday and got
Yeah,
back
I
to
was
my
I was
car.
too.
You were too?
Yeah, I
Did,
went with my 3-year-old son. Let's just say we didn't last very long.
well, at the very least, I was half inside. Like the windows were open in the booth, but it was still hot, but had the air conditioning fighting its best fight behind me. But I got back to my car and I could not touch the steering wheel because my steering wheel is black and it was so hot. I was burning my hands.
Ow.
It said 104 in my car when I got into it. So, yes, very hot in Nashville. We got a lot to get to on the show today. Should be a fun one. Going to talk a lot of Titans in this first hours. Again, we are 1 week away. 1 week from today, Brian Callahan will open up training camp for the Titans. We'll talk some Vols as well, as Josh Heupel took the podium at SEC Media Days down in Dallas earlier this morning. Steven Stamkos also introduced today as a Predator. So lots going on there over at Bridgestone Arena. And Trevor Maddich will join us at 4:30. And maybe my favorite part of the show, we're gonna talk some college football 25. I got my hands on the game for the first time yesterday. It is very difficult to play. I will lead with that, but we'll talk about that later in the show as well. But let's start with some Titans here. Again, 1 week away from officially opening training camp. I believe we'll have practice a week from tomorrow, a week from Thursday, but we will get media availability a week from today. Brian Callahan will speak to the media. And I think there's a lot of big questions that we have. Nick Keiser and I talked about a few of them yesterday. But, Adam, anything you're hoping to hear from Brian Callahan when training camp opens up next week?
I can't think of anything. Now, if Jared were here, I'm sure he would talk about how he hopes that the quote unquote toxic positivity that he claimed was emanating from St. Thomas Sports Park will have diminished. Because that was a big talking point of Jared's around minicamp, was that everybody was too happy about how things were going. But to be fair, when you hire a new coach, that always happens.
Yes.
Everything is always positive when you hire a new coach. It's a breath of fresh air. And, Brian Callahan is a first-time head coach, a first-time play caller. He's got a coaching staff full of first-timers in their positions. There's not a lot to go off of in terms of what they have done. And you've got year two, really year one of Will Levis as a full-time starter. And of course, Brian Callahan is going to pump his young quarterback's tires. So in terms of things I want him to say, or I'm hoping he'll say, I honestly can't think of anything. I'm sure it will be very positive. I'm sure he will salute his players for the work they did during the break time in between the end of mini camp and the start of training camp. I feel like more of the questions will be for the players, and we'll get into that as well in terms of which players
Yes.
we want to hear from, or honestly we want to see more from. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head I clearly want to hear from Brian Callahan next week, other than to just get started and overreact to things we see in the first day of practice.
Yes, of course. That's what we do. If Will Levis goes out there and L'Jarius Sneed picks him off twice in the first practice, it'll be L'Jarius Sneed is the best cornerback in the NFL, and Will Levis has Mason Rudolph nipping at his heels for his starting quarterback spot, because that's what we do. We overreact. I think the first thing I want to hear from Brian Callahan is everybody is here and everybody is available. I know that might be a little bit wishful thinking, but I'm hoping that we can hear that first off, Devondre Sweat and L'Jarius Sneed will be practicing. Those are the two that the Titans invested a lot in, and we haven't seen much of them in the offseason program. I'm hoping by training camp, both those guys will be healthy and out there. But you did get to one of the points I wanted to talk about as well, the toxic positivity, as Jared calls it. Do we see a tone change when training camp starts. And I think you're right. It will still be positive a week from today because nothing's happened yet. They haven't actually gone out on the practice field. But I wonder if we'll see a tone change and maybe starts holding guys accountable a little bit more in the media and saying, hey, we need to see more from this guy, instead of Traylon Burks is having A+ effort when we've got Trevor Maddich out there practice saying that's not the case. So I'm wondering if maybe now that not quite live bullets, but a little bit more live practices are going on, if we start seeing some more accountability and a tone change from Brian Callahan.
It's interesting because Brian Callahan has to develop his voice as an NFL head coach. So, during the introductory news conference, during mini camps and such, you could tell he's kind of feeling his way through. Okay, how am I going to present myself as an NFL head coach?
Yes.
Clearly, it's different than what Mike Vrabel did. It seems like Brian Callahan and Mike Vrabel are polar opposites in terms of how they will portray themselves in public. And by in public, I mean in news conference settings, which is what we mostly see them in or hear from them in. So it seems like Brian Callahan is still searching for his voice. So I think one thing that will sort of, to your point, one thing that will be a storyline throughout training camp is, how does Brian Callahan develop his voice as a NFL head coach? Does he stay positive? Does he always look on the bright side of things? Does he start holding guys accountable and not necessarily criticizing them in the press,
but not pumping their tires,
but not always pumping their tires, being realistic? I think maybe as he becomes more comfortable with the players, because I'm not sure exactly how much he's been able to be around them. Really not that much, I would imagine. So he's still probably getting to know a lot of these guys, and will really get to know them starting next week when they're in the building and they can start these activities. So I think as we get through training camp and into preseason action, I think that will be telling in terms of what kind of coach we can expect Brian Callahan to be in terms of his public persona.
And you mentioned Mike Vrabel, and I think Jared's kind of made this point before, that when it comes to hiring and firing coaches in all sports, but particularly the NFL, you kind of go to the opposite end. Like, Mike Vrabel was never the happy-go-lucky, everything's great, all this stuff, like very personable. Like, that was not Mike Vrabel. Brian Callahan is all of those things. So I think maybe that was kind of his way of introducing himself, is like, hey, I'm not going to be this surly guy who's always going to be, throwing jabs at the media and stuff like that. Like, I'm going to be an open book and all this. I think that's how Brian Callahan wanted to establish himself. But there comes a point when, if things don't end up going well, that has to change. You can't always be the sunshine and rainbows, as we've coined on this station before, when the results aren't showing. And right now there are no results, so he can do whatever he wants.
Right. And we'll see early on. We'll talk about Will Levis specifically, and what the first few games of the season might tell us. But their schedule starts with 4 interesting games in terms of the teams they're going to play. They open against Chicago. They open at home in week 2 against the Jets, and then they play the Packers and the Dolphins. So a good mix there of up and coming teams, established teams in the NFL, playoff contending teams. So we'll get I think we'll get through those 4 games. I think we'll get a good sense of many things. And if they go 2-2, if they go 1-3, if they go the dreaded 0-4, I think we'll see, Brian Callahan, we'll see how he reacts to those sorts of things. But this is the first time he's been in this position. Now, it was also the first time that Mike Vrabel had been in that position. Yeah. But I feel like Mike Vrabel established fairly early who he was going to portray himself to be, which was, as you said, a surly Belichickian, even though he was not a part of the Belichickian coaching tree. He did, of course, play for Bill Belichick, but that surly, tight-lipped, I would say adversarial.
Yes. Never going to give you anything.
Right. Well, he didn't pick fights with reporters. Now, certainly reporters tried to pick fights with him, I would say.
I mean, Joe Rexrode, what are you doing with your hands?
Yes. That's I actually had forgotten about that. That's the prime example, like that sort of thing. But you could also tell at the end of Vrabel's tenure, even though he would have never alluded to it, this is as someone who who was on the beat for a long time. You can tell when a coach is aware of where his standing is in his organization. Like I could tell before Peter Laviolette was fired as coach of the Nashville Predators that something was different about how he answered certain questions and his attitude in news conferences. Now he was always a bit surly too, but I could tell that there was something was amiss. And I feel like you got that with Vrabel at the end too from afar.
Yeah.
He just seemed like extra agitated. So I think we're going to see from Brian Callahan in these next few weeks a glimpse of who he's going to be, what kind of coach he's going to be, what kind of communicator he's going to be. And I think that's part of the storylines of camp that we're going to be focused mostly what's happening on the field. But I think of, how will Brian Callahan develop into his who he is as an NFL head coach, I think is sort of like a secondary storyline that's worth paying attention to.
And you mentioned those first 4 games. It's a good measuring stick first month for this team because none of those teams are world beaters.
No.
I wouldn't say any of those 4 are firm Super Bowl contenders, but I wouldn't put any of those 4 teams in the cellar of the league either. Bears would probably be the closest out of those, but they're expected to take a decent sized step forward. So excited to see how once those games actually start coming down and we get the results, what we see from Brian Callahan as he establishes himself as a head coach in this league. We're going to talk some Will Levis as well in this first hour. There was a Bleacher Report article yesterday listed all of the teams, all 32 teams, their biggest potential bust for this season. Will Levis was named the Titans' biggest potential bust, but I'm not so sure that is really all that much of a dig at the Titans quarterback. And we'll talk about that next. You can get involved as well. Text or call 615-737-1025. Our phone and text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
with the newness going around, the main thing I focus on, the new offense, I'd just say like getting to know the offense, and by the time we get back to training camp here, literally like know this thing like the back of my hand, and be able to just run it and not even have to go to meetings if I don't need to, and be able to run the meetings essentially. So that's the biggest thing for me, locking in on the playbook and obviously developing as a leader, getting to know these guys, especially the new ones, and just feeling out the locker room and being there however I can for anybody.
That was Will Levis just over a month ago at the end of offseason training, as he went into that dead period, said what he's planning on doing ahead of training camp, which is now just a week away, wanting to learn the playbook like the back of his hand. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingen in for Jared Stillman here on Stillman and Company. Going to talk some Will Levis as we broadcast live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. I mentioned before the break, Bleacher Report, as they love to do, released their 32 teams, and you can insert what they're evaluating. They do this probably 100 times a year. Biggest trade candidate on all 32 teams. This one was biggest potential bust for all 32 teams, and they named Will Levis the biggest potential bust. But Adam, I don't know if that's necessarily a dig, because yeah, he probably is the biggest potential bust. That's not saying he's likely to bust, but he's a guy who wasn't entirely consistent his first year, had a lot of doubts coming out of Kentucky, and now heading into his first full year as the full-time starter, there is a large bust potential for him heading into this season.
When I heard the word bust, and when you sent this over, and I was thinking to myself, who would I put in that category? My mind immediately went to Devondre Sweat.
He was one of the other ones
right.
I thought of.
So I think with Will Levis, it makes sense. He's a young quarterback, a rookie quarterback who got a taste of the league last year. His statistics, for the most part, were unimpressive. Now, when you look at just the numbers and don't put them into the proper context, which I think a lot of people do, specifically with the Titans, people will look at Will Levis and say, well, he was this and this as a starter. This was what his quarterback rating was. This is how many interceptions he threw. That, but you're not putting into the context of like what the team was dealing with and working with, particularly on the offensive line. So I think that works against Levis in these sorts of conversations. And I don't want to get into the national media disrespects the Titans thing, because that's not where I'm going at. But I just think that a lot of people did not watch Will Levis last year. They saw just what the numbers say on Football Reference or ESPN.com and go off of that. But I understand the point of why, there's a lot riding on Will Levis. There's a lot riding for him. There's a lot riding on the team for him to emerge as when we think about what the baseline for success is for Will Levis. Last week I was on with Nick Keyser, and we were reading the State of the Titans story on NFL.com. Adam Rank did one for every team. And he said that for 2024 to be a success for the Titans, they must, and each team was, every team had one of 5 answers, and the Titans were the lowest possible answer, which was show progress. That's it. I think it was win the Super Bowl, conference championship game, finish over 500, something like that. I can't remember all of them, but the last one was just show progress. And that's what I think it is with Will Levis this year, is just show progress. Show that some of the big time throws he was able to make last year. I think the one thing that everyone did see, speaking of the fact that most people did not watch Will Levis, I think the thing most people did see were his debut, which was historic, and his comeback in Miami,
which were his 2 best games.
Right. So people did see those things. So that's why I feel like there should be some, and maybe I'm contradicting myself, but maybe there should be some excitement, about Will Levis nationally specifically. But when it comes to bust, I think of Devondre Sweat because a bust potential, because the draft analysts were mixed on that pick in terms of where the Titans decided to draft him. there were red flags, which is a term I don't like to use, but there were red flags about, his availability, his character, his weight, and he did in terms of his availability, and I guess his weight, he didn't, put those fears aside because he was rarely available during off-season training.
Yes, he practiced day one, and that was about it.
Right. So there are going to be a lot of eyes on T'Vondre Sweat. And if T'Vondre Sweat is unavailable for whatever reason, if he's hurt, if he's unable, or even if he's available, but he's not in condition and he's unable to be on the field on a regular basis, what are the Titans going to do in terms of their pass rush? I feel like there's a lot hinging on T'Vondre Sweat in terms of what the Titans defense up front will look like and as a whole.
That's almost exactly what Teron Davenport said a few weeks ago to me. I asked him about depth on the defensive line, and he said the Titans have conditional depth, and that condition is whether T'Vondre Sweat is going to be a factor this year, and that's very much yet to be seen. We don't know whether he can be even a 2-down player, let alone a 3-down player, which is what the Titans have kind of implied that he is by picking him at the spot that they did. T'Vondre Sweat, I think, is going to be the first guy that everybody is looking for in those tweets next week when the first practice is who is available and who is not. I think T'Vondre Sweat is the guy that everybody wants to know if he's going to be out there. And you're right, that is bust potential. The other name I would put in there as a biggest potential bust for the Titans this year, not that I think he's going to be, I have faith in him, but Calvin Ridley would be another guy. If he comes out and isn't healthy or doesn't produce at the level of a top 20 receiver like he's being paid, I think he has large bust potential this season as well.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of unknown about Ridley coming back last season. And after being suspended through the entire 2022 season, and, he had a great season. I mean, he had more than 1,000 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. There was a lot to like about what Ridley did in Jacksonville. Now you're hoping that he can build off of that. And that's another part that goes into the Levis of it all is Levis last season was dealing with a cast of DeAndre Hopkins. And then in terms of stature of pass catcher, you have the DeAndre Hopkins up here and everybody else down here. With no disrespect to Chigakonkwo and Nick Westbrook-Akine and the like. But it was a big drop-off in quality.
He was in a league of his own last year.
But now you have Ridley. You have Tyler Boyd as well. And, I think Ridley is going to need to be, that deep threat for Levis.
Yeah.
We know that Levis has the arm strength. And it's going to be on Ridley to get open. And, so that Levis can take advantage of that, and they go hand in hand. I mean, if Levis busts this season, Ridley will absolutely bust.
That is true.
So
it goes hand in hand.
It does go hand in hand. So and that's another thing that puts pressure on Levis is he has a much better cast of pass catchers around him, even in the backfield. You have Tajay Spears who can catch, Tony Pollard, who is more of a sure-handed pass catcher than Derrick Henry is. So there are a lot of weapons there. I mean, it brings to mind what Brian Callahan saw with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Now, I'm not comparing anybody on the Titans receiving corps to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins for that matter. But it's similar. The young quarterback was set up with plenty of weapons.
Yes.
And that is, so it's on Levis to take advantage of that, because if he doesn't, then it looks like they spent all that money for nothing.
Texter on our text line, Ben says, we don't need him to take a step and be a fringe quarterback and get a contract like Daniel Jones. We need proof in the next 2 seasons that he is going to be a top 8 quarterback, so we have a chance to get a Super Bowl by 2032.
2032. That's a long way away.
It's a very specific year too. But thank you for the text, Ben. It's a very good point. It's a point I've made on this station before, is that the worst thing the Titans can have with Will Levis is him be average, because then you don't know whether to move off him, but you don't know whether he's ever going to be the guy that can take you to where you want to go. So I think that's going to be the big story this year with Will Levis. We'll keep talking Will Levis in the next segment as well. as we talk about him being labeled as the biggest potential bust for the Titans this season. And you mentioned, Adam, about how the two things that people should remember from Will Levis last year in terms of the national audience are the debut against the Falcons where he threw 4 touchdowns and the Dolphins comeback. And he has so much improved around him, but yet the national narrative isn't that Will Levis is going to take a step. We'll keep talking about that coming up next. Again, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today, talking Titans on this Tuesday afternoon. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
All right, let's talk about my friends at Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I'm telling you, I've been using Hiller for years, and I absolutely love them. Ever since I moved into my first home, which was, 6 years ago, I have been a customer with Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. And this year, Hiller is celebrating their 34th year in business this month. They're bringing the celebration to you with their birthday bash. So from now until July 31st, enjoy free smart thermostats with select new HVAC systems, free water tests, $300 off new tankless water heaters, and if you buy 10, you'll get 2 free landscape lights. So celebrate Hiller's birthday bash all month long with, again, my friends at Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Again, they take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Again, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, celebrating 34 years in business. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today.
Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, rolling along on this Tuesday afternoon. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, in for Jared Stillman. Again, still on vacation. He will be back next week, ready to roll for training camp. We're talking Titans here in this first hour, talking about Will Levis. Bleacher Report named him as the Titans' biggest potential bust this season. We have texters on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You can text as well, 615-737-1025. Dylan says he agrees that the biggest potential bust this season is Will Levis. He loves the guy and truly hopes he succeeds, but if he doesn't, the franchise is set back 5+ years, which is true. You've got to start over with another quarterback, and maybe it's not 5 years if you find the guy immediately. But
well, let's think about that for a second. So, and by the way, we were talking about this during the break, and we want to clarify that when we say bust, we're not saying that Will Levis is going to be a bust in his career,
or Calvin Ridley,
or Devondre Sweat.
Sweat.
We're talking about if these players don't meet expectations, what could that mean for the Titans this season?
Yes, the investment matters just as much as the results. As the more you invest into Calvin Ridley, you gave him $96 million. If he doesn't perform this year, he would be a bust. As Devondre Sweat, picked him 59th overall.
I think so.
No, that sounds late.
It was 38th. Was it
38th? Yes, I was 20 off. Yes, 38th overall.
You're within the margin of error.
I think I was thinking of where Jared wanted to trade down to.
Oh, okay. Yes, that whole conspiracy. Does Ian miss the conspiracies? I wonder. I mean, Ian's busy right now. He does everything back there. The show has been devoid of conspiracy theories the past few weeks. Is that a breath of fresh air for you? Are you missing it a little bit? How do you feel?
I feel good about it.
Okay,
it's been a nice little breath of fresh air.
I can throw a few in there for you if you want.
Okay, you can come up with something.
I'll come up with something by the end of the show.
But I mean, camp will be here before we know it. There'll be plenty of conspiracy theories thrown about.
That is true. But if Will Levis does not meet his potential and they cut bait on him, the good news is, I guess, is that they didn't use a first round pick on him to do it.
Correct.
But you probably picking at the top of the draft, and you can pick a quarterback and start all over again. I mean, maybe this time next year we're talking about Titans QB1 Shedeur Sanders
or Carson Beck
or Carson Beck.
Who knows? Who knows who will be?
Dion wouldn't let Shedeur come here.
You don't think so?
I don't think so either. But
I don't know. I'm just saying.
I've said it before. If Shedeur Sanders' name wasn't Sanders, would he be considered a top 5 pick in this draft? I don't believe so. They went 4-8 last year.
Yeah. Started off so well.
They started 3-0?
I think it was 3-0.
And then
the Rock was showing up to their games. Everybody was on the sideline, and then they got crushed by
Oregon. It was like 56-3 or something like that.
But according to Deion Sanders, his wins and our wins are two totally different things, or whatever he said at media day. But anyway, tangent aside, I was thinking about a story that Bill Barnwell wrote during the offseason when we were talking about Will Levis. And I found it during the break, and the superlative Barnwell used on ESPN.com was team most likely to talk itself into its starting quarterback breaking out after a few preseason snaps. and this is what I was talking about with some of the numbers. So according to Barnwell, Levis's 29.1 QBR, which is situation adjusted, after taking over, ranked 30th out of 33 qualifying passers, only ahead of Tommy DeVito. I'm doing the hands thing if you're watching on the stream. Bailey Zappi and Trevor Siemian. That's not a group of quarterbacks you want to be associated with. So I think that's what some of the bust, quote unquote, bust potential of Will Levis is stemming from. Is that just the numbers on the page did not look good. But you have to keep in mind that few quarterbacks would have been successful behind the Titans offensive line. And that's another position. Like, I'm surprised and you mentioned this actually during the break as well. We should just keep the show going through the breaks. We say so many good things during the breaks, but we have to pay the bills. We haven't mentioned JC Latham. We're talking about the offensive line and how terrible it's been for the past few years. Well, they used a premium pick to take JC Latham at right tackle
and flip him
to left tackle. Now you're hoping that Bill Callahan can sprinkle some of his Bill Callahan fairy dust, which apparently exists, all over JC Latham, and he becomes your franchise left tackle, and you don't have to worry about that position for 10 years. That would be great. That would be the best possible thing. But if JC Latham struggles to adjust to left tackle, Will Levis is going to be on the ground, and he's going to look like a bust if he can't throw the ball because he's being sacked all the time. So, I mean, I'm surprised we took that long to get to the offensive line as a potential bust.
Well, and JC Latham, it does feel like the Titans fan base is kind of just already putting him in the, okay, he's going to be fine at left tackle. Like, it doesn't feel like anybody is worried about JC Latham right now. And you really hope there isn't an Andre Dillard moment like last year in the Patriots preseason game when Andre Dillard is playing third quarter snaps in the last preseason game. And everybody's kind of looking around like, why is your starting left tackle still in there playing with the third stringers?
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen with JC Latham, but let's hope that all of the good things that we saw in OTAs translate to training camp, to preseason, and then eventually into that week 1 game against Chicago. Back to Levis quickly here. You mentioned earlier about how, the national media and national fans of the NFL, the two things that they should remember are his debut, throwing 4 touchdowns against the Falcons, and that comeback against the Dolphins. And everybody kind of knows that the Titans have upgraded around him. They've made moves on the offensive line. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in Tyler Boyd. So it confuses me why there is still a narrative out there among NFL fans that, oh, Will Levis sucks. He's not going to be the guy for the Titans. But Anthony Richardson, who played 4 games last year, is being heralded as this breakout star, despite the fact that he had to throw with his left hand for most of offseason camp because his right arm was injured again. Like, I don't know anything about Anthony Richardson. I feel like we've seen more from Will Levis, and the Titans have done more around Will Levis, but yet all the hype is going to Anthony Richardson, which I've thought was interesting during this offseason media cycle.
Well, I think it's because of what we saw from Anthony Richardson before he was injured. He was scoring a lot of touchdowns, mainly on the ground. Yes. But he was scoring touchdowns and making big plays.
Highlight plays.
Yeah, I think that plays into it. Levis, as we mentioned, had that as well. But I think we were left with, I think Anthony Richardson just came right out the gate. I mean, so did Will Levis, I guess. But I think people were tantalized by what they saw from Anthony Richardson. He was also a much higher draft pick than Will Levis. So I think that plays into it too. What was he, the 4th pick in the draft?
Yes.
So the draft position plays into it too. If Will Levis was a first-round draft pick, I think the conversation around him, the hype around him would be much more pronounced than because he dropped in the draft. So I think Richardson's draft position and what he was able to do on the ground last year before he was injured, I think that probably play. And there's always just this weird fascination with the Colts during the offseason. Every single summer. There's always the Colts. It's like, and it very rarely pans out, especially in the post Andrew Luck era. There's always hype around the Colts every single summer, and it very rarely pans out.
That's a very good point. It is true. Like when they brought in Phillip Rivers, there was hype. Oh, they finally found the guy who can take this great roster to the promised land. Well, they went 1 and done in the playoffs. Oh, it's Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, you reunite him with Frank Reich. He's going to be the guy. That didn't work out. Matt Ryan. Now Anthony Richardson, they've gone away from the veteran guy. Now they've gone young. It's the same thing. We'll see. Maybe this one will pan out. Maybe the 4th or 5th time is the charm for the Colts. On our text line, Mike Dubb texts in, want to know, was Ryan Tannehill a bust? Which I think is a good question if you're asking about his time in Miami, because he was a top 10 pick. And he never won a playoff game for them. But I don't know if I would call him a bust because he did get a second contract there, which to me is kind of the dividing line between bust and didn't live up to your potential. Is, did the team that drafted you at least give you a second contract and give you a chance to keep playing?
Yeah. I mean, here, honestly, I think Tannehill exceeded expectations.
Yeah, definitely not a bust here.
No.
I think the question would be, I think the question was about his time in Miami.
Yeah, just because he was injured, and they did invest in him with a big draft, with a high draft pick. So I'm surprised, unless I completely missed it. I'm surprised Ryan Tannehill doesn't have a job.
Me too.
Like I thought for certain he would have latched on to some team by now. Maybe he's one of those like in training camp kind of deals. Maybe he's the first quarterback
waiting to see if somebody gets injured or something like that.
Maybe he's like was it Joe Flacco last year who was called off his couch?
Yes.
Right. Maybe that's Tannehill this season. He's the veteran who's sitting at home who gets the call while watching the game saying, hey, we need a quarterback. Maybe Tannehill fits that role this season that Flacco did last year.
I'm sure that somebody has called him and said, hey, we'd like you to come play for us. And I'm sure Tannehill is having a ton of fun down on his boat in Florida.
Drinking Celsius.
Yes, drinking Celsius after throwing 3 interceptions.
Yeah, don't take pictures of it when you're supposed to be at minicamp.
Working out, that's right.
Right, when you're supposed to be working out. That's bad, very bad.
I mean, there's got to be some fits around the league that he would totally upgrade their backup quarterback situation.
I mean, I think a lot of people obviously would have connected the dots with Arthur Smith, but then they traded for Justin Fields. I could have seen Wilson went to Pittsburgh first, right?
Yes, okay. It was Wilson first, then Fields.
So I could have if the Steelers would not have traded for Justin Fields, I think Tannehill backing up Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh would have made a lot of sense, just because of his connection with Arthur Smith.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd have to go like room by room, quarterback room by quarterback room to see which team obviously needs it. But it feels like I would not be shocked if a team has an injured starting quarterback in the middle of the season, and instead of starting their backup quarterback, they call Ryan Tannehill from home. And say, I think come start for us on Sunday.
That could be what Tannehill is telling teams right now.
It's interesting to know what Tannehill is looking for.
Like that dude's made $300 million in his career? At least $200 million. Does he need an extra 12 or 15 or whatever they're going to offer him to come be the backup? I don't think so. I think he says, you know what?
Yeah, maybe he's looking for a place to start.
Call me when I can get under center on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'll come play for you.
Maybe
but for now, I'm good on my boat.
Like he came here for this kind of situation, knowing that the starter was maybe on a little bit of a short leash, shaky ground, But I mean, Green Bay comes to mind with LaFleur, and I don't know who Jordan Love's backup is. I don't think they have anybody. And Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield, and I think they don't really have a backup last I checked. So there's a couple of options. So I'm not sure.
There's always some quarterback that goes down, whether it's preseason or whether it's early in the season. And I think you're right, Adam. I think Tannehill probably is the first guy who gets the call off the couch.
Sean Clifford is listed as Jordan Love's backup in Green Bay.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with
I would
his
take
work.
Ryan Tannehill over Sean Clifford.
Where please fill me out on who Sean Clifford is.
Went to, did he go to Syracuse? Am I making that up in my head?
Nothing's coming to mind off the top of my
Kyle
head.
Trask is still the backup in Tampa Bay.
He went to Florida. We know that. Yeah.
So,
yeah, Trask hasn't really shown much.
Penn State. Sean Clifford, Penn State. Yes. That I do remember that. He
close
was
to the same region.
Yes, he was after Trace McSorley. He was the guy who took over. So yes, plenty of spots for Tannehill to go if it comes open. But I guess we'll see. We'll see if he ends up there. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to text or call. We'd be glad to hear from you. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared this afternoon. When we come back, we're going to keep talking some NFL. Bill Barnwell, who we've already mentioned on the program, put out an article earlier this week talking about trendy Super Bowl picks. Some of these teams, and I believe there was a formula for this that he uses. So it's not just him picking the most Twitter mentions of who ends up being picked to win the Super Bowl. There's a formula for this. Apparently he's done it for a few years, and he's picked 3 teams that he thinks could end up being Super Bowl contenders this year. We'll get into that next. Stillman & Company here on this Tuesday afternoon, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
All right, here to tell you about Window Nation. That's right. If you are looking at your inefficient windows, and this time of year, you're going to know if you have inefficient windows because it is hot. And that means high utility bills all year long, not just during the summer, but especially during the summer. And my friends at Window Nation sell some of the most energy efficient windows you can buy, and they were ranked highest on Forbes' list of best window installation companies. I may be changing out some windows at my home, and if I do, the only team I'm even thinking about using is Window Nation, especially for this great deal. Right now, for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free, plus 0 down and no interest or payments for 2 years. Again, that's for every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 windows free, 0 down, no interest or payments for 2 years. Stop paying more than what you have to. Call today. Get that in-home estimate. I had one. It's so easy. 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. Again, that's 866-90-NATION. Window Nation. Give them a try. Again, windownation.com.
Stillman and Company here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, filling in for Jared today and tomorrow. We'll be back on from 2 to 6 as well. Ian Safar is here. Going to talk some NFL trendy Super Bowl contenders here in this segment. Do want to mention some news. Caleb Williams has officially signed his rookie contract, joining Rome Odunze today. So the Bears have locked up both of their top 10 picks, and they will get set to face the Titans in a little under 2 months now. So that'll be a nice welcome to the NFL, facing L'Jarius Sneed and Jeffrey Simmons for those two. We're going to talk about trendy Super Bowl picks. Bill Barnwell of ESPN, I guess he's been releasing this article for 5 years. I had not seen this until you sent this over this morning. But based off of playoff success in the past and quarterbacks and all this stuff, he puts together trendy Super Bowl picks who aren't the Chiefs and the 49ers, but who could make the next step and get to the Super Bowl this year. The three this year, two in the NFC North, Packers, Lions, and then the Titans, AFC South friends, the Houston Texans, which it makes sense. I would say if someone was going to say, who's your dark horse for the Super Bowl, those three teams would probably be well represented.
So the criteria that Barnwell uses, the team hasn't made a deep playoff run in the recent past. They exceeded their preseason expectations the prior year by a considerable margin. They made the playoffs and were competitive once they got there. They have a young quarterback who hit new highs or had an impressive rookie year the prior season. So two of the, I mean, all those teams check off most of those boxes. The one thing that stands out, obviously, is the Lions do not have a young quarterback who hit new highs or had an impressive rookie year the prior season, because Jared Goff has been in the league for several years. But as Barnwell notes, given that Goff was essentially benched and salary dumped for rebuilding his career, his performance feels different than the typical veteran at the helm of a team turning things around. So, Goff was left for dead would be strong, but he was jettisoned by the Rams. So it feels like he is emerging with the Lions at the same time, with who have a good young team that really exceeded expectations last year. What I thought was interesting was that in addition to that, and I don't think I would disagree with any of those picks.
No,
especially the Texans, which are who are the easiest choice because of what CJ Stroud was able to do last year, the emergence of Tank Dell and Nico Collins, the addition of Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. There's a lot to like about, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball.
Yes.
There's a lot to like about the Texans. What was interesting was he went back and looked at the trendy, sexy teams in the past. And, before I even got there, I was like, okay, last year was obviously the Jaguars, and that was number one.
Jaguars, I guess Jets wouldn't fall into that because Aaron Rodgers is definitely not young, but they were kind of the trendy Super Bowl pick last year as well.
Yeah, so the Jaguars were the clear, sexy pick last year. And I've said that I have more confidence in the Texans meeting those expectations this year than I did the Jaguars meeting those expectations last year, just because of the statistical improbability of the Titans going, 0 for 7 down the stretch, and the Jaguars winning enough games in that stretch with everything else breaking their way to win the AFC South. Like, not to say that what they did wasn't impressive. And you saw Trevor Lawrence, he played great down that stretch, but just if the Titans would have won one of those games, two of those games, it wouldn't have mattered. But the fact that the Titans lost all of their games and the Jaguars took advantage. So it felt, I don't want to say it was a fluke, but it did feel like there was a lot of luck associated with the Jaguars did. I don't feel that way about the Texans. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel that way about the Texans. The other teams Bill Barnwell mentioned that were the sexy teams last year, he mentioned the Giants, because I think they were coming off of a playoff win, right, against Minnesota.
Yes.
But then Daniel Jones, that first game against the Cowboys to start the season last year went terribly. He was hurt for most of the season. He also mentioned the 49ers, but because of Brock Purdy. But the Niners had, according to Barnwell and the rest of us, had been good with Jimmy Garoppolo too. So
yes.
they had the young quarterback part of it, but the rest of the team had been good before that. So, of those three teams, The Texans are the obvious one, and that's one that we're going to pay attention to because they're in the Titans division. But the Packers are an intriguing team to me, and it'll be interesting to see the Titans go up against the Packers in week 3. I feel like that'll be a good measuring stick game, not just for mostly for the Titans, but I feel like the Packers too, because if you are going to be that type of team, you have to take care of teams that most people think are below you. And most people will believe and should believe that the Packers are better than the Titans. So if the Titans win that game, that's a feather in their cap. If the Packers lose that game, I think it sort of damages the mystique, perhaps, of what the Packers could be next season, if that makes sense.
The Packers are one of the more intriguing teams this year because there's not a lot of star power on that team. Like, I don't know if you can think of a guy. We were talking yesterday about the ESPN top 10 at each position that they're releasing throughout the past couple of weeks. Like, just thinking through the Packers right now, there isn't a face outside of Jordan Love, who I wouldn't say is a top 10 quarterback in the league. There isn't really a face of that franchise, like a star that you can point to and say, like a Devontae Adams was for so long for them, or
right.
Aaron Rodgers. They had Charles Woodson back in the days that they were making it to the Super Bowl. Like, but it feels like they're just a very solid team. They do have Jair Alexander on corner.
They do, and one of those receivers I feel like is going to emerge even more so, either Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs or Jaden Reed, I feel like came on near the end of the season.
Yeah.
Like one of those guys. They also brought in Josh Jacobs, now,
and replaced Aaron Jones.
Right, who went to Minnesota, which is weird. A lot of running back movement this offseason.
It's going to be so strange.
It is.
To see like Austin Eckler in a Commander's uniform.
Yes.
And Tony Pollard in a Titans uniform.
Josh Jacobs won the rushing title 2 seasons ago, right?
Yes.
So
he narrowly beat. No, that was the year. Was that the year Derek got hurt and missed 6 or 7 games?
He had 1,653 rushing yards in 2022. I'm going to go out on the limb and say that he won the rushing title.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
In 2022. So they have a recent rushing champion. Now, Josh Jacobs, I wouldn't consider I would say he's a star player. I wouldn't consider him like a star, like the kind of guy that will drive you to watch a Packers game. You're not going to watch a Packers game because of Josh Jacobs. You're going to watch a Packers game because of Jordan Love.
Yes.
So, yeah, you're right. They're a really solid team, but they don't have that star power. But I don't think you necessarily you don't have to have the star power necessarily to be a sexy team.
I get the wide receivers is where I just think it's funny. It's like they have 3 wide receiver 2s, but we don't know which one of them is really the lead guy, which maybe is a good thing for Jordan Love, where you can trust all 3 of your guys. Don't feel like you have to force feed any of them.
It feels like one of them pops at any given game.
Yes.
Like there's the Christian Watson game,
he has 4 touchdowns.
Right, the Romeo Doubs game, the Jaden Reed game. Like it just and that's good. I mean, it keeps the opposition on its toes because you don't know
they can't key on one guy.
Exactly. So I think the Packers are going to be an interesting team to watch this year for sure. But I think the 3 choices by Barnwell, I can't think of a team that he's obviously missing.
No, those 3 seem like the surefire picks to be. Yes, they're not the favorites. Like I would put. Maybe the Lions, I guess you could. They went to the NFC Championship game. They were really close to going to the Super Bowl last year. So maybe they would fall into the top tier of the NFL with the Chiefs, 49ers, Ravens, but maybe not. And I think the Lions are always going to be kind of taken down a notch just because of the history of that franchise.
Could you count the Jets? Like you may not get the criteria, but you have Aaron Rodgers coming off of a serious injury.
Yeah.
You still have some young players there. I mean, they've got a great defense. You've got Garrett Wilson. You've got Breece Hall. You've got Sauce Gardner.
Possibly Devontae Adams. I was
going to say they're about to trade for Devontae Adams, apparently.
Right. So, the Jets may not check off enough boxes based on Barnwell's criteria for a trendy team, but I feel like there's going to be plenty of, it's just because it's the New York Jets and it's Aaron Rodgers. But I might throw the Jets in there as like like if you can have a sexy pick, like an undercover sexy pick. I don't know if there's a category underneath trendy. Like I would slide that. I might slide the Jets in there too.
I think last year they were the overwhelming
Yes.
pick of everybody's like, oh, no, it's not the Chiefs. It's going to be the Jets. This year, it's a little bit more subtle. It's a little bit less in your face with the Jets, where last year they were on Hard Knocks and everybody's Aaron Rodgers is on Pat McAfee every single week. And it's like this year, it feels a little more subtle.
The other one that comes to mind quickly, they also don't fit most of the criteria, but the Falcons, because
Yes,
they now have a quarterback. They now have a quarterback, and they've got a lot of young weapons, like between Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, like with an actual quarterback that can get them the ball. They, and that division is so easy relative. That division is wide open. I think the Falcons might maybe qualify too.
We'll keep talking about this on the other side when we start hour number 2, talking Super Bowl contenders as we are now officially into training camp for some teams. Ravens reported yesterday. I think a few more teams are reporting later this week. Titans a week from today. So we keep talking about who's at the top of the league and who could end up pulling off some upsets this year and making a deep run in the playoffs. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman here on this Tuesday afternoon. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Stillman and Company on this Tuesday afternoon. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingen filling in for Jared Stillman as he enjoys his final week of vacation before training camp gets into full swing next week. Ian Safar is here. We spent hour number 1 talking a lot of NFL. We'll start the same way in this hour. We'll finish up the 3 o'clock hour with some Vols talk. Josh Heupel was at the podium down at SEC Media Days in Dallas earlier today. We'll talk about Tennessee as they prepare for the 2024 season coming up in just about 6 weeks. But again, talking some NFL here. If you want to get involved, you can text or call 615-737-1025. Our text and phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Talking Super Bowl contenders. And Bill Barnwell released his article earlier today, actually, about trendy Super Bowl contenders. Mentioned the Packers and the Lions in the NFC, the Texans in the AFC. And I want to talk AFC Super Bowl contenders, Adam, because I wrote it down the grid today. The Chiefs, to me, are starting to feel like the Patriots of the 2010s, where it doesn't matter who's around Patrick Mahomes. You always just have to put them at the top of the list. And the AFC has just been so QB-centric over the past 25 years. I mean, you look at the Super Bowl participants from, I guess, since the Raiders went in like 2003, so 20 years or so. The only quarterbacks to participate in the Super Bowl from the AFC, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Joe Flacco. 6.
Jeez.
That's it. The NFC, I bet you could name at least 12 to 15. So it feels like you got to have the quarterback. And that's why the Texans and the Jets, as we mentioned, as some trendy picks in the AFC, they make sense because they've got the quarterback and possibly have a team around them that could compete with a Mahomes-led Chiefs squad.
I'm looking at the AFC right now. You know, I'll start with the AFC West because it's what we're talking about. I don't see any of the teams in the AFC West challenging the Chiefs. The Chargers are the only one that really stands out to me, and because they have Justin Herbert, but they have a whole new receiving core.
Yeah.
No more Keenan Allen, no more Mike Williams, no more Austin Eckler. It feels like a changing of the guard there, of course, with Harbaugh in as coach now as well. I feel like the Chargers are not ready for that just yet. It feels like they're taking a calculated step back, perhaps. You know, in the AFC South, I don't see any of those teams, despite what Ben in Cumberland City is texting me about my Colts take. The Colts have not made the playoffs, by the way, since 2020. So I don't see. There's always a worst to first. I talked about this with Keyser last week. You know, the Texans went from worst in the AFC South to first last season. I believe the article, actually, I was talking about it, not with Keyser, but with Big Joe, because it was Ian who sent it to me. I think it was 19 of 21 seasons. There's been someone who went worst to first in a division.
Yeah.
It feels like the Bengals are that team this year. I feel like the Bengals with a healthy Joe Burrow are that team. Maybe they can get back. You know, I would probably like in term after the Chiefs, and I feel like I'm going to pump the brakes on the Buffalo Bills for a while. I just feel like Josh Allen, until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to go as hard on Josh Allen as Derek Mason did, you know, at the end of the midday show. But I feel like with the Bills, I'm in believe it when I see it mode. So I feel like in the AFC, just off the top of my head, the only teams I feel like can challenge the Chiefs are the Texans, assuming they can continue to take another step, but that's a big if, you know, with a second-year quarterback. The Ravens are always going to be there. I think the Bengals are going to be better this year. I mentioned the Jets earlier, but all of those teams have question marks. The Chiefs the Chiefs also have question marks, but as long as you have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, you're going to be fine, probably.
And that seems to be the equation for Andy Reid and Brett Veach is, hey, we've got these 3 guys who we've built around. And, you know, if we put a bunch of average players around them, they will elevate everything and keep us where we are. I think the thought process for a lot of people was heading into last year was, okay, the AFC can't run through Arrowhead because it was 5 straight years the AFC Championship was played in Kansas City before it was in Baltimore last year. I think that's right. They lost to the Patriots, beat the Titans, beat the Bengals twice, and the Bills. So, or lost to the Bengals once, beat the Bengals once. So yeah, 5 straight years it was an Arrowhead. Well, that didn't last because newly acquired Titan L'Jarius Sneed knocked the ball out of Zay Flowers' hands, and the Chiefs went into Baltimore and got the win. So now who knows what the equation is to beat this Chiefs team. Heading into the last couple of years, I was thinking, you know what? They finally don't have the team around Mahomes, and they're going to take a step back. Now I'm just going into it saying somebody's going to have to get lucky in the playoffs and beat them, because I'm not picking against them until proven otherwise that somebody can take them down.
Right. Despite everything Kadarius Toney attempted to do to prevent the Chiefs from winning, he did just enough, or I guess, wasn't really a factor. But which game was it? The game against the Bills where he lined up offside?
Yes.
Yes. It was, and he had plenty of drops, so many drops by that receiving core. And I don't know what the status of Rashee Rice is. Like, is he going to be?
That is true.
Is he going to be available?
He'll get suspended surely some games.
Yeah. But they acquired Marquise Brown, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to think of who else they have on that receiving core. I mean, is it Justin Watson? I felt like played a big role for them last year.
I think they brought back, was it Hardeman?
Nicole
Well, and they drafted Xavier Worthy too.
Yes,
so
that's true.
Right now their receiving core looks like Rashee Rice, who again we don't really know the status of. I would assume he will be available for at least a good portion of the season, but who knows? Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman.
Doesn't sound great.
It's fast though.
It is fast, and it's Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that's what makes him the quarterback he is that he can get this group of players who on paper does not sound very impressive and get them to win a Super Bowl, because that's exactly what happened last year.
Yeah, I think if you cover up the quarterback on, say, the top 7 AFC teams, the teams that you would expect to be playoff teams, you cover up the quarterback on Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, Texans, Jets, Bills, Dolphins. I don't know. I could be completely off base on that, but let's say those are your 7 teams. I don't know if the Chiefs don't have the worst roster outside of quarterback among those teams.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, certainly on offense, maybe.
Yes, at least offensively.
Yes.
Like in terms of weapons, the offensive line, it still has some pieces on the offensive line. Like Joe Tooney's still there, Creed Humphrey, Tennessee Volunteer, Trey Smith, Jawan Taylor. But Wanya Morris is their starting left tackle, according to this. So, again, you cover up Patrick Mahomes. I don't know how good this roster is, but because they have Patrick Mahomes, this team should be favored, and I will pick them until the end to go to the Super Bowl until somebody stops them.
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, I'm looking at other teams. The Browns certainly have the defense, but I do not trust Deshaun Watson at all. To be, a quarterback that can lead a team to a Super Bowl at this point of his career.
I agree with that. I mean, from what we saw from Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco looked better than him coming off the couch at 40 years old.
And the Ravens are interesting too. I mean, the Ravens are always there, but Lamar Jackson has been unable to get them over the hump. Now he did get them to a conference title game, but hasn't gotten them to a Super Bowl, unless I'm clearly forgetting something. The addition of Derrick Henry is the first time they've had an actual running back in a while. That changes the dynamic. And Zay Flowers, I thought, had a really good season last year, and they've got plenty of dogs on defense. The Ravens are always there, but I feel like they might be primed for a small step back. I don't know why I feel that way, but Lamar Jackson has, despite the individual accolades, has not been able to get the Ravens to where they want to go ultimately.
Well, as Titans fans know, getting to the AFC Championship, there's no guarantee you get back. Like the Titans got there in 2019, and the thought was, okay, this is just the start of the window opening, and the Titans never got back there. So who knows? The Ravens finally broke through. All of the talk around Lamar Jackson was he can't win in the playoffs. He can't get to the AFC Championship game. He did. They fell short. Who knows if they can get back? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones coming up next on this. We'll keep talking Super Bowl contenders, talking about the quarterbacks in the AFC, and can anyone challenge Patrick Mahomes this season as they look for a three-peat? Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman. here on this Tuesday. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Rolling along, talking some NFL, Super Bowl contenders. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared today. Ian Safar is with us as well. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to chime in. You can text or call. We have Adam in Portland on the line right now wanting to talk about AFC contenders. Go ahead, Adam.
Dude, I've screened this, and Ian's heard me a lot through the years, man. I've screened. If you don't have a quarterback and you don't have a good head coach, you don't have a chance of being a Super Bowl contender. Like, and there's outliers, 2000 Ravens or whatever, but like you need those two to be both of them to be really good, and they can make up for a lot of deficiencies in your team. Like, I would love to think that the Titans could somehow be a dark horse to go deep, but I refuse to do that with a rookie head coach. If I'm picking anybody in the AFC, it's probably the Bengals out of nowhere just because I love Burrow. And I think any coach where you start to see his other coaches get picked off, that's a pretty good sign that he's a good coach. So I like the Bengals as like a sleeper pick, man, to do some deep stuff.
Thank you for the call, Adam. And that's a very good point and brings me to kind of where I wanted to go with this. I agree with you, Adam, that in the AFC, if you don't have a legit star quarterback, you can't compete. I don't think that's the case in the NFC. And it's weird that it's never flipped back. Like, all of the generational quarterbacks somehow end up in the AFC. And I don't understand why. I guess if Caleb Williams pans out, then there's finally one that goes the other way. But like, It was Peyton, it was Ben, it was Brady for a long time. You could even put Phillip Rivers was in the conversation as being a contender almost every year. And then you immediately get the next generation of Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Jackson. While the NFC, it's just like, oh, well, if you have a really good roster and a manageable quarterback, you can make the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, who is the quarterback of who is the most renowned quarterback in the NFC right now? I mean, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Daniel Jones. It's not Jaden Daniels. He just entered the league. Jared Goff, Jordan Love, Sam Darnold / JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins,
There's
Bryce
no one
Young.
that scares you.
Stats wise, it's probably Dak.
Yeah,
or Hurts.
Purdy, Stafford, Geno. Is Geno Smith still the starting quarterback in Seattle?
Yes.
Yes.
Geno Smith and Kyler Murray. Like that's just a lot of that just screams average or unproven.
The ESPN top 10 they released of quarterbacks had Matthew Stafford 5th, which I thought was high, but the top 4 were AFC. Herbert was 6th. I think
so. Based on that list, Matthew Stafford is the best quarterback of the NFC.
Yes, and I think if you're making an argument, it would be someone between Stafford, Dak, Hurts, Purdy, Goff, like maybe Kirk Cousins, like somebody in there. But would you take any of them over the top 5 in the AFC, if not 6, maybe?
Probably not. No.
I mean, and I mentioned it earlier how only 6 quarterbacks have represented the AFC in the Super Bowl since 2003. You look at some of the other ones. Panthers, Jake Delhomme was the quarterback of that team.
Oh, man.
Correct, right? No.
Yes, that he was.
Seahawks, Matt Hasselbeck, Rex Grossman.
I was about to say, all you have to do is just mention Rex Grossman.
Yes,
I mean,
Rex Grossman took the Bears to the Super Bowl. They lost. Eli Manning.
Nick Foles won the Super Bowl recently.
Well, it's like, and you did have a couple of premier quarterbacks in the NFC in Breeze and Rodgers for a long time, but they only went once. They won both times. They each won, but they only went once. Colin Kaepernick, Russell Wilson went twice in a row. Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, and then Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo. Like it's just, there are 12 to 15. I didn't count going through there, but since 2004, there's only been 6 AFC quarterbacks, which means you have to be the top of the top as a quarterback to even sniff the Super Bowl in the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
Where in the NFC, it's like, hey, have a good enough quarterback in a roster. I just don't understand. It's not like AL and NL baseball where like forever one had the DH and one didn't, and it was kind of different types of the same game. They play the same game. They have the same draft. They have the same free agency. I don't understand how it always seems to end up that the generational quarterbacks end up in one conference.
Well, I mean, perhaps, you just look at the AFC. We can just look at the AFC South. I mean, look at all the young quarterbacks in the AFC South. Maybe CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is the elder statesman of that group. Maybe that one or two of those quarterbacks emerges as the next, as the next group, in terms of the young, the next generation of quarterbacks. But when you look at the NFC, it's, you have Jaden Daniels there now. We'll see. I mean, Michael Penix is in Atlanta, but he's not expected to start, at least immediately. Purdy will always be knocked for the fact that he's a quote unquote system quarterback. That will always be the conversation about Purdy. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about Jaden Daniels. I'm really intrigued by what he might be in the NFL. I wonder if that would be huge for Washington. I mean, they've needed the quarterback in the worst way for a very long time. But yeah, just there's no obvious heir apparent to maybe help the NFC catch up to the AFC.
It's strange. I can't really understand it, but it's just how it works. And maybe Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams can flip this trend because they now have the top 2 picks in the draft over there. But I've always thought this was so weird that it's just like you can't beat the quarterbacks in the AFC. Like you get Brady and you get Mahomes who just dominate, and the NFC has been able to skate by for a while. We do have a caller on our phone line driven by Wilson County Hyundai. Charlie wants to dive in on this conversation. Charlie, what you got for us?
Hey, man, it's almost like it's in their days because the AFL had the wide open passing attack and whatnot. So all the teams in the AFL, of course, they became the AFC. That's just where it started at. So the teams that's in the NFC, they've always been ground and pound more, and you require a quarterback to, to play ball, to throw it. So I don't know. I just think it goes all the way back to the AFL days, and that's where everybody's, game plan started.
Thank you for the call, Charlie. I mean, I can see it. I think that schemes do change as you get new coaches and new players and all of that. And as the NFL has become more of this gigantic media thing, and, free agency is such a huge thing and the draft is such a huge thing, it's not quite as, we've always been like the Titans for years. It's like, no matter who's the head coach, we're going to have a ground and pound. Now they're going away from it. So I don't know. I think maybe that would explain it if it was happening in the 80s or 90s. But we're so deep into the NFL now where it's like there's been so many different coaches and so many different styles of playing the game that you would think it would not split 16 and 16 like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that Charlie raises, but I'm still stuck on this. I'm still stuck on this list of NFC starting quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. I mean, you said it. I mean, there are some real doozies on this list. I mean, you have your Aaron Rodgers and your Drew Breeses, as you mentioned. Russell Wilson when he was
Eli Manning,
when he was Russell Wilson, and Eli Manning, Cam Newton. But just that, I'm stuck on Rex Grossman and Jake Delhomme. You had Donovan McNabb make it to Super Bowl in that run that Philadelphia had, where they were, what was it, 4 consecutive NFC Championship games, and they only made it to 1 Super Bowl, I think.
Yes.
It was, yeah. Look, if you can get to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman as your starting quarterback, anything is possible.
And it's just strange that not even one time over the past 20 years that an average quarterback has slipped through into the Super Bowl in the AFC. Like, as much as we make the "is Joe Flacco elite" jokes, like, Joe Flacco was a really good quarterback in this league for a long time.
Yes.
Joe Burrow has shown that he has the ability to be a really good quarterback in this league for a long time. But not once did we see, I'm trying to think of just a random quarterback like a Carson Palmer or an Andy Dalton when the Bengals were pretty decent back in the early 2010s, late 2000s. Like, never once did Marvin Lewis get his Bengals teams even close to a Super Bowl. I don't even think they made an AFC championship game.
I don't think so.
I don't think they even won a playoff game. I think that was a huge thing that Marvin Lewis couldn't win a playoff game. But it's strange that not once was a team good enough around an average quarterback to beat Brady, Manning, Mahomes, Roethlisberger. I don't know.
Would you consider Eli Manning an average quarterback? I mean,
but that's in the NFC.
That's true. Yeah.
I guess Roethlisberger honestly could be he got there 3 or 4 times, and I don't know if I'd put Roethlisberger in the Mahomes, Brady, Peyton Manning tier.
No, probably not.
But the Steelers have some sort of magic. They made some sort of deal that they're never going to have a losing season ever again under Mike Tomlin. It's insane how they do that. Even when they're picked to be one of the worst teams in the league the last couple of years, they find their way to 9-8 or 8-1 or whatever it is.
Hey, he's kept his job. So that's all that matters, right? Consistency.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll step away from the NFL talk here coming up next. The Tennessee Volunteers, it was their day down in Dallas at the SEC Media Days. Josh Heupel took to the podium this morning. We'll talk a little bit about what he said, talking about his young quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. Talk about the Vols' outlook for 2024. Don't forget Trevor Maddich joining us at 4:30. Lots to look forward to the rest of the show. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, filling in for Jared Stillman today, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. The Game Summer Ticket Tour is back. Join our own Joe Dubin at Yazoo Brewing Company at 900 River Bluff Drive in Madison this Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m. as he gives away tickets to upcoming concerts in Nashville, including Def Leppard, Bush, Train, Dierks Bentley, and more. You can also sign up for the grand prize tickets to a Preds home game, a Sounds game, and to the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/tour. Again, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in with you. Talked a lot of NFL to start the show. Let's talk some college football here. Tennessee Volunteers, it was their day down in Dallas at the Omni for SEC Media Days. And again, all our coverage of SEC Media Days is sponsored by Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Tennessee coming off a slight step back from their 2022 season, which showed a lot of promise with Hendon Hooker, nearly made their way to the college football playoff. This year, they put their hopes on the sophomore quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. I've said that a few times. If I'm saying it wrong, Vols fans, you can text or call and let me know.
It sounds good the way you're saying.
Iamaleava.
It rolls off the tongue.
I've mastered Uiagalelei from when I guess now he's all over the place. Clemson, Oregon State, now at Florida State. But yeah, Iamaleava, I'm going to have to play a few games with the Vols in College Football 25 and see how Reese Davis and Chris Fowler say it. But anyway, the Vols hoping to take a step forward, highly recruited quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, and I think everything kind of hinges on him this year for the Vols, whether he can step up. They've got an experienced team around him, bringing back a lot of guys, bringing in some transfers. But we talked about this yesterday with Nick Keiser. Can he step up and play a full SEC schedule, tough road environments, and put the Vols back into contention this season?
So when the SEC preseason poll is released, which is tabulated during SEC Media Days, where do you think Tennessee is going to finish in that preseason poll?
So I looked at 247, and I think they had them fifth. I think they would be.
Where would you vote them?
I would vote them sixth, I would say.
Okay.
They had Missouri below them. I would put Missouri slightly above Tennessee, but I think they're firmly in that second tier of the SEC.
The first tier being Georgia, Texas, and
I
who
put
else?
Alabama and Ole
Okay.
Miss in there too.
All right.
I think that those four, Nick Keiser and I kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday, of those four are college football playoff contenders. I think anybody beyond that wouldn't be a surprise, but it would take them reaching a level that we're not expecting.
So ESPN bets odds for winning the SEC. The
Yep.
SEC champion, Georgia, is the favorite at plus 200, followed by Texas at plus 325, Ole Miss at plus 600, Alabama at plus 800, LSU at plus 1,000, then Missouri, Texas A&M, and Tennessee all tied at plus 1,400.
Okay.
So
A&M's a little higher than I thought they would be there.
Missouri's kind of come out of nowhere a little bit, huh? Like it seems that way.
Trevor Madge is going to join us later. I want to ask him about Missouri because as Ian knows, I am high on the Missouri Tigers this year.
That is correct.
Luther Burden, their wide receiver, is really, really, really good. And Brady Cook is coming back, experienced quarterback. I think the Tigers are going to be good. But I think them in Tennessee, those would be, I guaranteed it yesterday. I gave my Jared hot take guarantee that one of Missouri, Tennessee, and LSU will be in the college football playoff.
Okay. Well, I mean, just looking at this, it seems like Tennessee is relatively low. I mean, I would have assumed they would have had better odds than what I'm seeing, is what I'm saying.
The SEC is just it just means more.
Do you think it hurts them or helps them that there's no longer divisions?
I think it hurts them because they played in the easier division.
That's true.
Like the West has always been a gauntlet with Alabama, Auburn, LSU, A&M. I might be Ole Miss. The East, it was pretty much Georgia back a while ago with Florida, but like Georgia the last 5 years, it's pretty much been Georgia and everybody else. Tennessee made a little run 2 years ago. I think it hurts them because now you no longer have to just be the best among a selected 8 teams. You've got to be top 2 among all 16, and you add Texas and Oklahoma in there.
It feels like the Vols season is going to be decided in games 4 through 7.
Yes.
They are at Oklahoma, which is Oklahoma's first SEC game.
Josh Heupel's return to Norman.
Plenty of storylines entering that game. I think they have an off week after that. Then they're at Arkansas. So they go from at Oklahoma to at Arkansas. Then 2 home games against Florida and Alabama. It feels like that 4-game stretch is going to decide what team Tennessee is this season.
Yeah, and talking about the lack of divisions, I was listening to Willie and Derek yesterday. They were talking about the tiebreak procedure, which the SEC hasn't figured out yet. They have not released.
Might need to do that.
What the tiebreak is, and it's even more important this year than it ever has been, because let's say there's a tie for second place in the SEC. Whoever gets put into that SEC championship game, now you're playing for a bye in the college football playoff. You get a chance to go control your own destiny and play for a bye to the quarterfinals in the national tournament. Whereas if you lose that tiebreaker, now you're at the hands of the committee, probably going on the road in the round of 6 or the round of 12 in the college football playoff. So it's crazy to me that they didn't come up with the tiebreak procedures before.
No, I mean, it's they'll get to it. They'll get to it at some point.
Greg Sankey said something like they've got 8 different criteria that they're looking at, and it's like there have been tiebreakers for years and years and years. Just go to what the ACC does. The ACC did this last year, where it was the top 2 teams. Just do it that way, and head to head, common opponents, record against the opponent's opponents or whatever it is, point differential, go all the way down. And if you get to the 10th criteria, you do a coin flip.
Nothing should ever really, I mean, I guess in football, I guess other than kickoffs, not very many things should be decided via coin flip.
I don't know if it's ever actually gotten there in those, but I think every tiebreaker ever has to have at the very end just coin flip. Like if these are the exact same team from start to finish, then we're just going to flip a coin. I know they do that in the draft, and it's gotten there at least once in the last 10 years. Where
I guess one team is heads, the other team's tails, or just one team get to pick, like tails never fails, kind of thing.
I think it's like a double-sided coin with like the logo on either side or something like that. But I think it was Raiders and 49ers right across the bay. I could be wrong on this, but like 3 or 4 years ago, they had to flip a coin to decide who picked where in the draft, because they had the exact same strength of schedule, the exact same strength of record, and it came down to a coin flip at the combine or something like that.
You are correct. It was the Niners won a coin flip against the Raiders on Friday whatever Friday was in March of 2018 to secure the 9th overall pick. The coin flip was necessary to determine draft order after the Niners and Raiders finished with 6-10 records and were tied with a .512 strength of schedule.
Yes. So I understand it sounds stupid to have a coin, but I think every tiebreaker in all sports, like it'll go 1 through 9, all these criteria, and the last one is always coin flip, because it's like, hey, if you guys do the exact same thing, there's no other way to decide it. So we've got to put some way that we know 100% we can make this decision. So we'll see how the SEC deals with that, because that could end up being a big deal for Tennessee if they are able to get a win against Georgia. And, if they're tied, like let's say Georgia is number 1, they lose 1 game, and Tennessee and Texas both go 6-2 in the SEC. That tiebreaker is a huge deal, because it's not just playing for an SEC championship. You're playing for a bye in the college football playoff now that it's gone to 12.
Well, what would be, after finishing 9-4 last year, when you include the bowl win against Iowa, 4-4 in the SEC. I mean, what is the bare minimum in terms of what's their win-loss record that they could have, Tennessee, for the season to be considered a success?
I think Tennessee fans are expecting to make the playoff.
Okay.
I think that is their logical next step.
Can you make the playoff? I mean, we'll find out. I mean, can you make the playoff at 9-4?
I think 9 wins in the SEC gives you a shot.
It'll be close.
Or 8-4.
I think if you're 9-3 in the SEC, I think it gives you a shot. You will be bubble at best, but I think it gives you a shot. 10-2 in the SEC, I think you're in. So I think that's kind of the line. We had a texter yesterday say that the Vols floor was 9 wins. And I was just like, I don't know if any team can have a floor of 9 wins. Like your whole team gets injured. Are you going to win 9 games then? Like, obviously that's an extreme example, but like if Nico goes down or Nico isn't who we expect him to be, then who knows?
Well, let's say we give the Vols 5 wins off the top. They beat Chattanooga, NC State, Kent State, UTEP, and Vanderbilt, which the first 3 games of the season, the last 2 games of the season.
Yep.
So that's 5 games. So that means you need to win 4 of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida, Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Georgia.
I would feel good about Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State.
Okay.
So that gets you to 8.
That gets you to 8. So that means you need to win one of Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia,
Florida.
Okay.
So yeah, you need to win one of those Oklahoma, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, which I think is more than doable. Florida has struggled in Neyland Stadium. Billy Napier has not been who the Gators thought he was going to be. I think that's a very gettable game, but again, it's a rivalry game. To use the cliche, you throw the records out when these two teams play. So who knows there? At Oklahoma, that's a tough place to play. But I think 10-2 is on the table for the Vols. Anything above that, I think, is a stretch. But I think 10-2 and a spot in the college football playoff is on the table.
Interesting.
Get
those hopes up, Vols fans. You heard it here first. 10 wins.
I put that as their ceiling yesterday. And that is if Nico Iamaleava comes out and he is the Heisman candidate that he is being talked about as. Currently the same Heisman odds as Jalen Milroe. So we'll keep talking about Nico on the other side. Josh Heupel talked about his young quarterback down in Dallas earlier today, talked about the strides that he's made since playing in that bowl game against Iowa. We'll get to that next, talking SEC Media Days here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
You were a great quarterback at OU, and you've always been good with quarterbacks. Tell us about your latest quarterback, and he was such a highly recruited kid.
Yeah, was highly recruited because of his athletic traits. He's got the ability to throw the football sideline to sideline, vertically down the football field, extremely accurate, loose, quick triggered arm. He's got the ability to extend and make plays with his feet. That's as a runner that's, evading and making a play down the field. The thing that I've loved about Nico is, when he came into the building, he wanted to earn the respect of his teammates. And you do that through your actions, not your words. Everybody understands how hard he works to become the best that he can at his craft. He takes great ownership in his skill set and developing it, understanding of our offense. And as a young player, gets his first start in the bowl game. One of the best compliments you can give to a quarterback is when he goes from the practice field to the game field, it slows down for him. During the course of the bowl game, it slowed down for him.
That was Josh Heupel down at SEC Media Days in Dallas, talking about his young quarterback over there on Rocky Top, Nico Iamaleava. Again, our coverage of SEC Media Days, sponsored by Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, filling in for Jared Stillman today. Talk a little Vols today, as it was their day down at SEC Media Days. And the most interesting man on Rocky Top, Nico Iamaleava, heading into his first season as the starter. A lot of pressure on this young kid. And Adam, we were just kind of going through Tennessee's schedule, seeing where the wins might come out. I didn't realize until earlier today that game, it's listed at NC State. It's in Charlotte, actually. So a neutral site game, kind of in between Raleigh and Knoxville-ish. So no true road test until going to Oklahoma in week 4 of the season. I think that game is where we're going to find out what this young kid is. I will tell you a story about my college football 25 experience last night that could apply to this later as well. But tough to go into an SEC road environment for the first time as a 19, 20-year-old kid. And I guess that's where we're going to see, does he have the poise to be an elite quarterback in this conference?
Nick Saban, which, by the way, just the Nick Saban being a member of the media is just, I'm still getting used to it.
He's been awesome.
I did like the story he told the other day about how he left his credential in his hotel room and had to go back and get it, and he hadn't worn a credential in 16 years. But Nick, it's less jarring than seeing Bill Belichick doing analysis, but it's not far off. But he did an interview with one of the, I think, the local television stations in Knoxville, and they asked him about the quarterback, and I'm not going to, you say it so well. Nico, say it again.
Iamaleava.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Nico. I don't want to butcher it. But the person on the station asked Nick Saban about Nico, and Saban didn't compare him to Jalen Milroe, but took a page out of the Milroe playbook, as it were, to say Milroe went through this a little bit last year, where you have to feel like you have to make all the plays. Like, that would be his advice to Nico. Don't feel like you have to go out there and make all the plays. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Milroe's start to the season last year was
not good.
Was not good. He caught on later in the season. But I think part of the reason, according to Saban, that Milroe struggled so much at the beginning of the season was he was trying to do too much.
Trying to play hero ball.
Right. And that was Saban's advice to Nico. Don't try to be the hero on every single play. Make the right choices, make the easy choices, and the game will come to you. And I thought that was interesting advice just by using the experience that Saban had just last year with his starting quarterback.
Yeah, and Jalen Milroe, I think everybody remembers, loss at home against Texas, and that was kind of the Texas's back game down in Tuscaloosa. And then the next week, Milroe was struggling. They were down to USF, who they play this season as well, and then kind of figured it out. I think we might see that same kind of learning curve from Nico. At the very least, he gets Chattanooga and Kent State in 2 of his first 3 games to kind of get his feet wet and get into the rhythm of the season. But, man, it is going to come down fast you mentioned games 4 through 7 could be what decides this Tennessee season at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, home against Florida and Alabama. That's kind of where Nico's going to kind of have to find his footing in the SEC because, as I said yesterday, yes, he played really well in that bowl game, but there's a difference between playing a neutral site game against Iowa and going to Norman to play Oklahoma on the road and that Brett Venables defense, which Oklahoma wasn't known for their defense, but they've gotten a lot better since Venables showed up.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him and just the team in general because of the Heupel angle, because it's Heupel's return to Norman. It's a big deal. It's Oklahoma's first SEC game, or at least their first SEC home game. Or is it their first
SEC game?
Okay, first SEC game. There's going to be a lot of interest in that game. Oklahoma is a tough environment to play in, usually. So that, you're going to learn a lot about the quarterback in a game like that. But, the other thing to keep in mind, too, is I know that bowl games are rife with players sitting out. I don't know how many Iowa players sat out of the game last year.
I don't remember seeing a mass exodus, but you would assume that not everybody played.
Right. So I would have to go back and look at the depth chart from that game. But the bowl game was great. I mean, it was a great showing. But, now you're expected to do that week in and week out, or at least come close to replicating that. And that's tough for a young quarterback.
Cooper DeJean did not play in the Citrus Bowl.
Okay.
So
that helps.
Their best cornerback was not out there, but most of their top 5 defense in the country was still out there. So not taking anything away. Nico played great in that game, but again, there is a difference between that and having to go on the road in the SEC in a hostile environment, possibly a night game, and go get a win. Because if Tennessee wants to get back to get to the playoff, which I think Coach Heupel said it in his opening statement today, that he thinks they made a lot of strides the last 2 years, but that's not the standard. The standard is to compete for championships. They want to get to the playoff. If you want to get to the playoff, you have to beat Oklahoma in that game. Maybe there's a path where you lose to Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and sneak in. But I think if you want to control your destiny and get into the playoff, that's a game you have to go win.
Right. And the Volunteers' first 5 games, their first two SEC road games, first 2 SEC games are road games.
Yep.
At Oklahoma, at Arkansas. And NC State is not a pushover.
No.
So, and that's a neutral site game, but NC State is a solid football team. So there are 3 pretty stiff tests in the first 5 games for the Volunteers before you get to your home slate in the SEC, which opens with the game against Florida on October 12th. So it's like you don't even have to really wait until the Oklahoma game. I mean, that's going to be a big game. I mean, that NC State game, I feel like it might be easy to overlook, but the Volunteers probably shouldn't.
We're going to know a lot about this Tennessee team and their quarterback by the time that 3rd Saturday in October when they face Alabama rolls around. Because could this team be 6-0 and top 5 in the country? I think it's possible. Likely, maybe not, but I think it's possible. Could this team be 3-3 and reeling? I think it's possible as well. Maybe not likely. I think the answer is probably somewhere in between. But we're going to learn a lot about this team in the first half of that schedule and see if Nico can be the savior that Knoxville hopes he will be. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Wrapping up our talk on SEC Media Days today, as again, the Vols took their turn down in Dallas. We'll talk a little bit more college football when Trevor Maddich joins us in a little over 30 minutes here on the program. But when we come back, we're going to talk some Preds. Steven Stamkos officially introduced in person today as one of the newest members of the Nashville Predators. We'll talk about some of the things he said and where this Preds team stands. Can't believe I'm saying this, under 3 months to go until we are back to hockey season somehow, as the hockey offseason much shorter than the football offseason. Excited to talk some hockey with Adam coming up next. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, in for Jared Stillman, Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, The Game. Hour number 3, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan filling in for Jared Stillman. Again, still on vacation, taking his summer break as he gets geared up for training camp, now just a week away. Ian Safar behind the glass, broadcasting here from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. You can get involved, text or call 615-737-1025. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up at 4:30, Trevor Maddich will join us. We'll talk some Titans, Jamal Adams, SEC Media Days, and much more. But let's talk some Preds here. It's been all football so far. Let's hit the ice. Steven Stamkos talking to reporters earlier today. He joined Willie and D-Mace earlier today as well. And a lot of good stuff coming out of that from Steven Stamkos. I loved Alex Doherty, got him to recall his last goal he scored in Bridgestone Arena. I guess he's kind of Sean McVay-like with that stuff, that he can recall all of the goals he scored and how they happened.
Well, he scored more than 500 of them, so it would be very impressive if he can remember all of them.
I doubt all of them, but it was cool, the clip that Alex posted. He said he wanted to quiz him because he had heard that that's something that Stamkos could do. And he was like, do you remember the last time you scored in Bridgestone? He said it was a good pass from Corey Perry or something like that, and a one-timer. It's funny how some of those guys, just their brains are wired for it. Like, I mean, I mentioned Sean McVay, who can recall every single play call if you tell him the down and distance and where they were on the field.
Yeah, it was striking to see Steven Stamkos. I guess he took some, I think they call them gladiator shots. When they have him in full uniform. And it was weird enough to know that Steven Stamkos was going to play for another franchise, but then to see him in a Predators uniform was just jarring. Like, it's going to take some getting used to big time, not just for Predators fans, but hockey fans around the league, to see Steven Stamkos in another jersey after wearing the Tampa Bay Lightning jersey for 16 years. But, as he said today, he wants to win the Stanley Cup. That's why he plays the game. He said, quote, sometimes people are afraid to say that and it heightens expectations, but you have to believe it in order to achieve it. And that goes to what I've been saying for the past few weeks after everything that the Predators did in free agency. I've laid down the gauntlet. Now, Big Joe Dubin actually laid down an even bigger gauntlet. He said Stanley Cup or bust this season. I'm not laying down that gauntlet. My expectations for this team are twofold. One, they need to finish in at least the top 2 of their division in order to have home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs, and they have to make it to the Western Conference Final. They don't have to win the Stanley Cup this season, but they have to make it to at least the conference final, because this is a old team, and there's only so many years you can get effective play out of older players. Steven Stamkos is 34. You want to make sure that you get the Steven Stamkos that can still score 40 goals before, you want to win the Stanley Cup while you still have that version of Steven Stamkos, which means you have to do it sooner rather than later. I
agree with you. I would say 2 years is probably the window. You hope for 3 with this team as constructed.
I also lean 2. I mean, you could make the argument for 3. I think their best chance to win the Stanley Cup with this group after what they've done in free agency is either next season or the season after.
And Steven Stamkos, you mentioned, going to take some time to get adjusted, just like Derrick Henry in that Ravens purple. The first time those gladiator pictures were posted, I know Titans fans were throwing up in their mouths all across Middle Tennessee. I'm sure there are Lightning fans who feel the same way, seeing Steven Stamkos in the yellow today for the first time as well. One of the big questions that has been asked since Steven Stamkos signed was, where is he going to play? He was asked about that by Willie and D-Mace earlier today when he joined Willie and D-Mace on the program, and was asked, you going to play left wing or are you going to play center? Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the attitude I've had since I switched, a few years ago to playing the wing was, I'll play wherever you guys want me to play. That's going to help the team. But we've had some brief discussions with Bruno about that in terms of how he sees the lineup playing out. Obviously, there's some new fresh faces in the lineup, and chemistry is something that sometimes takes a little time, and you want to, feel some things out and try some different combinations out. But listen, if they want to put me back at center, I've certainly played enough years in this league at that position, still take a ton of face-offs. So that's something I'm completely comfortable with. And, I've had a lot of success at that position in the past. So it's something I'd be certainly open-minded to.
So Stamkos saying open to playing center, but Adam, you said during the break, wing is probably where he will best serve this team, where he's been playing for the last couple of years.
So our friend John Glennon of the Nashville Post had a story the other day where he put together his lineup card, and he had Steven Stamkos on left wing on the second line. And there's this Twitter account that goes by Lines line up. I assume when the game starts. I don't know how they track it. But according to this Lines account, which is a reputable account, a lot of reputable people follow it, Steven Stamkos lined up at center. I'm going to assume started a game at center one time last season.
Wow.
It was, I think, on the wing, left wing 58 times and on the right wing 20 times, I want to say. But that's what Glennon was able to find out. So the Lightning rarely used him at center. Now, he does take a lot of face-offs, so that's something he can do. He can take the face-off and still play wing. But to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to play him at center regularly. I was saying to Willie before we came on the air that I wonder if they could use Stamkos at center in, late game situations where you're down a goal or two and you need offense. I'm thinking of like what happens when the Oilers put Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the same forward line. Like, could you put Steven Stamkos at center on the line with Philip Forsberg and Jonathan Marchessault if you're looking for offense, 6-on-5 situation, or you really need to get back into a game and you need to score goals? Like, I think he can do it in spurts. I would be wary of doing it regularly. And the question then is, okay, if Stamkos is playing left wing, who's his center? It's not an easy question to answer. I think a lot of people assume it will be Tommy Novak, and that would be my guess. But I think the issue with that was that Novak was a non-factor in the playoffs, and that I think soured some Predators fans on what Novak has done in the regular season. I've also seen the suggestion that Colton Sissons could center the second line, which I have a lot of respect for Colton Sissons. He's been a key member of this team for a very long time. I'm not sure he's the guy I want to be playing with Stamkos and presumably Marchessault. I want someone who's more offensively inclined to be playing with those two.
See, and I think I do this as well, but I think there are a lot of Preds fans who want to look at the top six and have the sexiest top six possible. And having Stamkos at center allows you to run out the three line. If you have the same top line as last year with Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist, and then you can run out Marchessault, Stamkos, Evangelista. I think that's what their Preds fans are looking at and saying, well, that looks better than having Tommy Novak at center, but is that the most effective for the Predators, even though maybe it looks best on paper, I guess is the question.
And I don't doubt Steven Stamkos when he says that if that's what they want him to do, he can still do it. I'm sure he can still do it. He's one of the best players of his generation. Like, I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about him doing it. Like, I believe that he can do it. I personally just think it would be best. He has been an effective left winger or right winger, but mostly left winger now for the past few years. And I think that's how the Predators should use him. Now, if there's an injury and he has to play, like, look, if Ryan O'Reilly gets injured and he misses a couple weeks and Steven Stamkos has to center the top line, I think he can do it for a couple weeks. I just don't think I would put him at center for 82 games.
Yes.
Like, I would not do that. But then again, Andrew Burnett knows a lot more about this than I do. But I would not put Steven Stamkos at center, like, permanently.
Great to have the versatility to be able to do it, but you don't want to plug him in and say you are a center for our entire season. Correct. But
correct. Being
able to say, hey, you know what? We think this lineup could help us push for some offense here. Let's put Steven at center, and him being able to play it. It's what you want, but maybe not what you want all the time.
Yeah, the Predators, I wonder, this is just me openly speculating. I wonder if there is another move to be made to bring in someone. Now they would have to maneuver the cap a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a lot of it, because they don't have much cap space right now. Off the top of my head, I would check Cap Friendly, but Cap Friendly is no longer with us. They would have to do some other maneuvering. But I wonder if they could bring in someone, who would be relatively cheap, who could play center. I remember I was on with Willie on the midday show a few weeks ago, and we were talking to Elliot Freeman, and he mentioned that the Predators had been linked to Ross Colton, who's a forward for the Colorado Avalanche, who coincidentally started his career with the Tampa Bay Lightning, would have played with Steven Stamkos. I think he was traded to Colorado last summer. And at one point, I believe he was the Avalanche's second line center, because remember, they traded for Ryan Johansson with the intent that Johansson would be the second line center, and that didn't work. So then I think they moved Colton up, and Colton held that spot for a little while, and they ultimately traded for Casey Middlestat to be that second line center from Buffalo. But Colton does have that experience. I wonder if there is a trade that happens before training camp or before the season, where they bring in someone who could fill that role, that may have a little bit more experience in that particular position, that wouldn't break the bank.
And I know even after the flood of Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea, there were still some Preds fans hoping for Chandler Stevenson too for a little bit there, till he got that massive contract in Seattle. But that would have been a guy who would have made sense if the money made sense, which it didn't. So maybe Colton can be the not bargain bin isn't the word, but the cheaper version, the discounted version of a guy like Stevenson.
Yeah, and Stevenson, I think, and look, when Stevenson was linked to the Predators, I thought it made sense for a number of reasons. But when I look at the contract that he got from the Seattle Kraken, be glad if you're a Predators fan that the Predators did not sign Stevenson to that contract.
Oh, yeah.
I think it could age poorly. But yeah, I mean, they've improved on the wing, and in the next segment we'll get into like a quantifiable way to show just how much they improved this offseason. But they've improved on the wings especially. I think when you have Stamkos and Marchessault, who combined to score, I think, 82 goals last season, the center, not to say that center isn't important, but as long as you have someone who's competent, who can get them the puck in scoring areas and let them do their thing, I think you can get by. We were talking about that with quarterbacks earlier. Like, if you have a good roster, you don't need the star quarterback. Like, I don't know if you need a star second line center, as long as you have someone that can get Stamkos and Marchessault the puck in scoring areas to do their thing.
That is a good point. And we will talk about the value that the Predators were able to gain in the offseason. An ESPN article earlier today, kind of looking at which NHL teams were able to gain the most or lose the most throughout the offseason. We'll get into that next. And then Trevor Maddich joining us in just about 15 minutes at the bottom of the hour. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
I want to tell you about my favorite stop, and that's Twice Daily. I go to Twice Daily all the time. They call it Twice Daily, but for me, it could be once daily. It could be 8 times daily. It could be 4 times daily. I mean, again, Twice Daily has everything you need. Just like every other convenience store, they've got everything. But not only do they have everything at their convenience store, but they've also got the beer cave, which this time of year, you want to get that ice cold beer, and you can with the beer cave. Plus, they've got the best coffee, snacks, lunch, dinner, breakfast, you name it, they've got it. Their snacks are the real deal. They're all made to order. You can get a huge warm pretzel and dip, or a 3-piece chicken tender stack, or spicy boneless chicken wings, or more. They got the cheese sticks. I mean, they got something for everybody there. You can order in-store or on the Twice Daily app. All fresh, tasty, and priced just right for your budget. That's what's so great about Twice Daily, and I absolutely love it. And since it's summer, do not forget to grab an ice-cold drink, too. Download the Twice Daily app and join their loyalty program to unlock special discounts, savings, and so much more. If you're looking for convenience, Twice Daily has you covered. That's Twice Daily.
Back here on Stillman and Company, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, in for Jared Stillman. Ian Safar here as well, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Talking a little hockey before Trevor Matic joins us in the next segment. Talking about this Preds offseason, and obviously made waves right off the bat when free agency opened. Not sure I've ever seen a team sign 3 of the top 5, what the TSN had listed on there within about 10 minutes of each other.
Yeah, James Duthie, who hosts TSN's free agency show, had showed that graphic of the top 5 free agents on TSN's board, 3 of which had Predators logos next to their names. And he said, I don't think this has ever happened where we've had one team sign 3 of the top 5 free agents on our board. So it was a big deal. It was definitely a big deal. I mean, no, it was a few weeks ago now, but looking back on it, the Predators, Barry Trotz made his intentions known. We just didn't think that it was actually. He felt like I remember having this conversation with, I think it was with Willie or maybe Robbie. I've been on the station so much over this. Like, I'm not complaining.
On so many different shows.
I enjoy it. I very much enjoy it. I think it was Robbie. We were talking about, like, well, if they strike out on Stamkos, could they go after Marchessault? Like, we were talking about, like, Marchessault as, like, a consolation prize for Steven Stamkos, not that they would get both. So it was a big deal. And, Stamkos was here for the first time, at least introduced to Nashville. As far as I know, he didn't do anything like go to Tootsie's like PK Subban did and sing Folsom Prison Blues or anything like that. But that might not be Steven Stamkos' style. We know that Steven Stamkos can dress the part.
Yes.
When the Lightning were here for the Stadium Series a couple of years ago, he had the cowboy hat on and the Canadian tuxedo.
Yep.
Fit right in. I'm not concerned about Steven Stamkos fitting into Nashville, but there are heightened expectations on the Predators this coming season because of what they did in the offseason, understandably so.
Well, an article released today, Neil Payne over at ESPN, putting, as you said, a quantifiable way to measure how much value the Preds gain this offseason. Listing out based on net goals above replacement. So based on who you brought in, who you lost, how many goals above replacement did you bring in? Sadly for Preds fans, number 1 on this list is the Chicago Blackhawks at 56.5 added goals above replacement. But the Preds are second, 33.9, which it makes sense. You bring in 3 really high-profile free agents like that. They didn't lose anybody all that impactful. Ryan McDonough would probably be at the top. And then they also list Kiefer Sherwood, Jason Zucker, but you bring in those 3 guys, you're expected to be at the top of the added value list in the offseason.
Right. And context is key in this conversation. The reason why the Blackhawks are the number 1 team is because they were basically fielding a minor league team around Connor Bedard last season. So, they brought in actual players like Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi and Laurent Brossoit in goal. The goals above replacement statistic that Neil Payne, who authored this story, is using, I think, is proprietary. I think it's his own model.
Yeah.
So, and you can find similar models like this anywhere. But, it's what's also interesting, not just the fact that the Predators were the number 2 in terms of net goals above replacement added. You look at the teams that lost the most value. And there are teams that the Predators will compete with in the Western Conference. The number 1 team, the team that lost the most value, the Vegas Golden Knights, number 1. The Winnipeg Jets, number 3 in terms of most value lost. The Kings, number 5. The Stars, number 6. Teams that the Predators are going to be competing with in the standings are, have lost a lot of value. So, I think that kind of speaks to what I was saying about where, what the expectations for the Predators should be. And that's to compete for a division title. I think it's to compete for, at the very least, a Western Conference final appearance. And I understand might be asking a lot, for a team to go from not winning a playoff series for 6 years to winning 2 series in 1 year. But you don't make these moves if you're not expecting to compete for a championship. And, The example I used with Keyser last week was, the one thing you don't want to happen is you don't want to miss your window with Steven Stamkos. Let's use Stamkos specifically. You don't want to miss your window with Stamkos being the effective goal scorer that he still is, and then have what happened to Alex Ovechkin last season, because the only player in the league who has scored more goals than Steven Stamkos since Stamkos debuted is Alex Ovechkin. And Alex Ovechkin did eventually get to 30 goals last year, but he started with 8 goals in his first 43 games. You don't want that to happen to Stamkos. You don't want to miss your window with Stamkos and then have the final year or two of his contract
The
and he's
shell
playing
of
like
Steven Stamkos.
exactly like Alex Ovechkin did in the first half of last season. So that's why I think it's very important for the Predators. If they're going to win a championship with this group, it has to happen in the next 2 years.
And I think reasonable expectations are reach the conference finals. Like you said, there's so much randomness sometimes in hockey that I don't know if you can say Stanley Cup or bust, like Big Joe said last week. But I think if you get yourself to the Final Four, you put yourself in a position to go compete for a Stanley Cup. And I think that's what the Predators have put themselves in a position to do with these moves over the next 2, hopefully 3 years, as you still get a productive Steven Stamkos out on the ice.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important, and he is still incredibly productive. I mean, he scored 40 goals last year. He attempted more one-timers than any player in the league. He scored 19 of his 40 goals off the one-timer. 13 of those 19 were on the power play. So there's a lot to like about what Stamkos can bring. I was talking about with Robbie the power play, and I'm of the mind that the power play unit, the top unit, should be Stamkos, Marchessault, Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Yossi, and it should not leave the ice. Like the Oilers' top power play, McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins never leaves the ice. The Rangers' top power play unit, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, I think Trocheck's on there. They never leave the ice. I think this power play should be loaded up and it should never leave the ice. I doubt that ultimately happens, but I think Andrew Burnett should strongly consider it.
I can't wait to see this team on the ice. And I can't believe, I know football season obviously is much shorter, but the football offseason always feels like it's forever. And it's like, oh, we just finished the Stanley Cup Finals 2 weeks ago. By the way, we're less than 3 months away from opening night. So
yep, October 10th.
Cannot wait to see this team on the ice with the additions that they've made. Again, Steven Stamkos introduced to the media earlier today. And I believe Brady Shea and Scott Wedgwood tomorrow.
That is correct. But if you want to hear Brady Shea, you can go back to last week. Big Joe and I had him on the show. I think it was on Thursday. We had him on the show for his first interview as a member of the Nashville Predators. Really good interview. You can find that wherever you find your podcast.
Yes, love it. Go listen to that and prepare yourself for him to be introduced tomorrow to the Predators media. We'll take a break here. When we come back, Trevor Maddich makes his weekly visit onto the program. We'll talk Titans, SEC football, and much more. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Getting back to football here, and we are thrilled to be joined in his weekly visit by Trevor Maddich, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, as always, thanks for coming on. How are we doing?
Just doing great. Great to talk with you guys, man. How you doing, Jake?
Doing good. Excited to be filling in for Jared here as he wraps up his vacation, and he'll be right back in time for training camp to have you on next week for the opening day.
Awesome.
Well, let's start with the Titans, Trevor. Since the last time you were on, Jamal Adams signed to a 1-year, just over $1 million deal. Seems like a low-risk, high-reward move from the Titans. What were your initial reactions when you saw this news come down?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, at his best, he's one of the best safeties in the league. The problem is, over the last 4 years or so, 3 years, he's missed a lot of games because of injury. And, and some pretty big injuries, soft tissue mostly. But he is a guy that, when healthy, is fantastic. So the question is he healthy now, and can he stay healthy? And so that's important, because really towards the end of that run in Seattle, of all the injuries he had to deal with, he spoke about how mentally it really wore him down, right? And so being healthy and being able to just be on top of his game mentally and physically, huge. But at such a team-friendly contract, I think they're in a perfect position to see if he can snap back to his previous self. And he doesn't have to be an all-pro player to elevate this team. All he has to do is be a very good player and come on in packages and rotations, even if he doesn't win the starting job, and he will still improve the playmaking ability of the defense. I think it was a home run move given the price tag.
And you mentioned getting him back to form a little bit. He gets reunited with Denard Wilson, who was with him up in New York for some of his better years in the league. Do you think that could be a key part in maybe not getting him back to all pro form, like you said, but just getting him back to being a solid safety for this team who can play next to Amani Hooker?
Yeah. When you look at the sort of the psychology of a football player, when things don't go well, it harms your identity. It's not just that you're a football player and that's what you do. No, that's not it. A football player is who you are. And when you can't do it well, or you can't do it at all, for whatever reason, it really strikes a blow at the core of who you are. And I think having Denard Wilson there, knowing who he is, knowing what makes him tick, what buttons to push in order to motivate him to get back to that place mentally. Forget the physical part. The mental part, I think, is huge. Then you've got the familiarity part, because Jamal Adams, more than anything else, needs a new start. He needs a fresh start. And instead of coming to a place where everything is just brand new and nobody knows him and all that, he's coming to a place where he's got great familiarity with the defensive coordinator. And that is a very, very big deal. That's one of the reasons that I love this acquisition. They're not counting on him to carry the secondary. They're not even counting on him to carry the safety position, right? But he's in position to be able to get back into the place that he was before mentally, and then physically, it's a question of whether he can catch up to where he was and solve those injury problems.
Trevor Maddich joining us on Stillman and Company. Trevor, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about training camp expectations, and Jake and I were talking about Brian Callahan specifically, because this is going to be our first real glimpse of Brian Callahan as an NFL head coach. We've heard him talk, we've seen him in mini camps and such, but training camp is where I feel like we're really going to get a sense of what kind of coach he's going to be in terms of how he portrays himself to the media, how he coaches up his players. I mean, what would you be looking for if we're trying to get a sense of what kind of coach Brian Callahan is going to be in the NFL as a first-time head coach? What sort of things can we see in training camp that might give us a glimpse of what that could be?
Adam, that's a great question. And the thing I'd be looking for is the focus and discipline of the players in every drill in practice. There are a lot of teams where the players are a little sloppy, a little loose with what they do in training camp. And I really saw that really for the first time side by side in major relief when I was out, after I had left Washington. I was back as a broadcaster and I was at training camp. And the New England Patriots with Tom Brady at quarterback came in to practice against Washington for a few days. And the difference in the way those teams practiced was absolutely night and day. Whereas Brady's operation was crisp, it was tight, and it was no nonsense. Now they would have fun with each other and laugh and goof around a little bit, in between things. But it was time to be in a drill. There was no goofing around. There was no laughing. It was get better at something in this drill. And everybody had assignments to get better at something today, every time. And anytime somebody got when they lost a little bit of focus, Brady was right there to literally snap them back into the place that he needed them to be mentally. This is not a physical thing, because sometimes physically you go 100%. Sometimes physically you go half speed or even a walkthrough. But mentally, you need to be 100% every time. So what I want to see is the effect of Coach Callahan on the team's mental focus through those dog days of training camp when physically they feel awful. Are they doing the right things with the right technique, the right way through the end of every rep of every drill, regardless of how fast physically those reps are supposed to be, because that will vary. Mentally, it doesn't vary. So this team needs to be closer to the New England Patriots standard of mental focus that I talked about in camp, and farther away from what Washington was like during those days that they were scrimmaging against Brady and his team.
So speaking of players that we're going to be keeping our eyes on when training camp opens, it's going to be kind of hard to miss T'Vondre Sweat because he's a large individual, but there is going to be a lot of attention on Sweat because of his unavailability during the offseason training program, just because of how important he will be to what this Titans defense can do. What would you be looking for from Sweat specifically once he's out on the field for training camp?
Right now, for Sweat, it's all about his physical ability to get through each rep and each drill and each practice to the end without falling off in conditioning more than the other guys will fall off around him. Everybody has their conditioning, especially early in camp. You fall off towards the end of practice. You just do. Then as training camp rolls on, you get into better football shape, and the drop between beginning of practice and end of practice is less and less. And ideally where you want to get for the start of the regular season is you're as strong in the fourth quarter as you were in the first quarter, right? Well, early on in training camp, everyone's going to have that drop. People think that, hey, if you just lift weights hard and do sprints and run hills, well, that'll get you ready. There's nothing you can do from a training standpoint in terms of strength and cardiovascular conditioning that will get you ready to play football. All it does is it gets you ready to start playing football. And then the game of football itself gets you ready to play. So I'd be looking at the first drills that he performs, where he performs at a physically high speed. Because again, remember, some drills are faster and slower full speed. But look at the high speed drills early in practice, and then go to the end of practice and look at the high speed drills and see his level of drop off compared to the guys around him. Now, early in camp, it's okay for that drop off to be more, because even though strength training and all that stuff doesn't get you ready to play football, just get you ready to start to play football, it still gets you ready to start to play football. And Sweat hasn't had the ability to do a lot of the things in OTAs, et cetera, that the other players were able to do. So he's going to be behind them. Early in camp, you will see a bigger drop-off. What I want to see in the second week and the third week, what's that difference between him and his teammates?
Trevor Maddich with us here on Stillman & Company, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics. We'll have more with Trevor on the other side. We're going to talk some SEC football. SEC Media Day is going on down in Dallas. We'll chat with Trevor about that and much more right after this Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Continuing our conversation here with Trevor Maddich, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics. Talked with Trevor in the first segment a lot about the Titans with training camp approaching in about a week. But right now, down in Dallas, SEC Media Days going on. Vanderbilt yesterday, but Trevor, today we got a trio of very interesting teams to me. Georgia was first. They're the presumptive favorite. But the other three teams that showed up in Dallas today, Missouri, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. I think those three teams are sleepers of sorts, top half of the league, and could maybe challenge with some of those higher teams. What are your thoughts on that trio of teams that presented today down at SEC Media Days?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, any of those teams could get into the college football playoff. They just need to stay healthy and have a few things break their way. I think Missouri is a team that's just fascinating because last year they had such a great season. And the thing is, they are one of the few teams returning in the nation, the combination of quarterback and receiver that is at such a high level. You know, I mean, people talk about Tennessee, and the fireworks that they've got in the skill positions, as long as their quarterback Nico Iamaleava is able to play up to expectation, which I think he will. But Missouri is one of those teams that can keep up. Brady Cook at quarterback is one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, and Luther Burden III is back at receiver, but they also brought in some guys from the portal and some other homegrown guys at Missouri in the receiver room that give them one of the best receiving groups in the SEC. They've got a really good running back rotation, even though Corey Schrader, their great back from last year, has moved on to the NFL. The offensive line should be one of the best in the conference. The big question for Missouri is the defense. Their defensive coordinator went off to, LSU. And so they've got some changes going on there, but they still have a good group there. And all they have to do is hold serve on defense, and that offense is going to be hard for anybody to keep up with. So Missouri is one of those teams that'll be really fun to watch.
Talking more specifically about Tennessee, Adam and I were chatting about Nico a little bit earlier and how maybe there will be some growing pains. He's only a true sophomore, and his only game he's played was a neutral site against Iowa. How do you see a guy that talented developing, and can he live up to these astronomical expectations of him in Knoxville right now?
Yeah, he can. I think it's important for him to understand what success looks like for him. His skill people around him are fantastic. Receiver Squirrel White is back. Brew McCoy is back. They brought in some transfers that should be really good players. They'll have all kinds of depth to spread the field with at receiver. Their running backs, once again, they'll have a good rotation of running backs. The offensive line is going to be super solid. And so his job is not to go out and win games. His job is to do two things. One is run the offense super fast. And then second is to put the ball in the right spot so that receivers can catch the ball on the run and then do damage after the catch. When this offense was at its best with Hendon Hooker at quarterback 2 years ago, the difference between Hooker and Joe Milton, the quarterback who kind of preceded him and then followed him last year, was that Hendon Hooker ran it fast, meaning when the tackle was made, the referee blew the whistle, and they put the ball down, placed it. The offense was ready to go right now to run the next play. That throws defenses off because they don't have time to get themselves set up with their defensive play calls. Then you've got Hooker was so good at hitting the deep strike. I mean, Tennessee sent receivers deep for days, and that's only mildly interesting if the quarterback can't hit him. But Hooker hit him. So that's the second thing for Nico. He needs to be able to connect on those deep passes like Hooker did. Because if that's the case, then it stretches the defense all over the field, and they're in a whole lot of trouble. Last year, the Tennessee offense was really good. They ran the ball more, or at least they relied on the run more than they did the year before with Hooker at quarterback. But at the same time, they should be able to do both this year. And as long as Nico can run it at a super hyper fast pace and get all the play calls in and know what to do, get the protections in, all the rest, and then hit those deep passes from time to time, this Tennessee offense has a chance to be the best we've seen for years, including the Hendon Hooker year.
Trevor, which SEC coach has the most to lose this season?
I'm going to have to go. Well, they all have a lot to lose, but I'm going to have to go with Florida. Florida is a place that expects national championships, which is weird. Billy Napier came in and didn't have a good start at Florida. And if he doesn't have a good year this year, it could be lights out for his career there. And the thing is, they've got what people say is the most difficult schedule in the nation. Oklahoma would be talked about as the most difficult schedule in the nation had it not been for what Florida has to go through in terms of who they play and where this year. And Florida has got to do a whole lot better. I mean, last year they had the Richardson was the fourth pick in the draft.
Yes.
He was, at quarterback, and they still weren't a very good team. They weren't a very good offense. With a quarterback who was the fourth pick in the draft, they weren't a very good offense. And so I think right now Billy Napier needs to win. He needs to win early. And the thing is, they opened the season against Miami. And Miami's got a coach that also needs to win and win now, Mario Cristobal, because he's been there for a couple of years. Things haven't gone like they've wanted. And this being an in-state game with two programs that have high expectations and haven't lived up to those expectations in recent years, really in recent memory, and two coaches on the hot seat, that game is fascinating to me because the winner of that game, the coach, will be able to exhale. Not let his guard down, but at least exhale. The loser of that game, the coach is going to be on the hottest of hot seats, and it's going to be a miserable place for them to be.
I want to ask you about another coach, non-SEC division, who appears to be on the hot seat. And it's based off of a spirited rant I heard from Paul Feinbaum the other day. Lincoln Riley at USC. I was listening to Feinbaum, who said that the coaching job that Riley did last season with the Trojans was, and I'm paraphrasing here, but not by much, one of the worst he's ever seen in college football. And that he anticipates that at this time next year, I should say, that Riley will not be the head coach at USC. He mentioned he might slink away to the NFL and get an assistant coaching job in the NFL. I mean, I know that USC did take a bit of a step back last year with Caleb Williams, but was that typical Feinbaum bluster, or do you think Riley is squarely on the hot seat at USC?
Well, let me start with this, that I have a lot of respect for Paul Feinbaum. He's been doing this for longer than most of us have been alive. And he's had access to the greatest in the game in terms of players and coaches and stuff like that. So he knows what he's looking at. Having said that, I see USC and especially Lincoln Riley completely differently. I think that Lincoln Riley came into that job at USC with as empty a cupboard of line of scrimmage talent on both sides of the line as I've seen in a major Power 5 program in a long, long time. They brought in some transfers, Bear Alexander, D lineman from Georgia. They brought in Arizona's best defensive tackle, that kind of a thing. But that wasn't enough to get that defense up to speed, and the offensive line was just not ready. They brought in a couple of offensive line transfers from the portal and paid them a lot of money, and turned out those guys couldn't play. And so that really set them back, because as good as the quarterback and receiver combinations were, if you can't block anybody, then that stuff is going to falter. And so, the defensive struggles at USC for the last couple of years have been, legendary. And so they've got a whole lot of work to do, but it's not just a matter of schemes and X and O's. I think Lincoln Riley, from a standpoint of the things the head coaches do, set expectations, and then from an offensive standpoint, the scheming and X's and O's, I think he's fantastic. I really do. I've spent a lot of time with him, and I love what he does and the way that he does it. But until he can get his line of scrimmage on both sides up to not just the Pac-12 level, but now up to a Big Ten level, which is a higher level than he's had to do the last couple of years, or higher than a Big 12 level when he was at Oklahoma. Now that they're in the Big Ten, I think that he still has work to do, and I don't think that the work that he has to do right now still is his fault if it's slower. I think after this year, it's going to be his fault. But right now, I think that he still is building over there, and it's going to take a while.
Trevor, quickly before we let you go, Clark Lee spoke yesterday, and Vanderbilt has made a lot of changes this offseason. 53 new players, new offensive coordinator. Clark Lee's running the defense, and they brought in Jerry Kill. How do you see this Vandy team building after a disappointing 2-10 season last year?
Well, I love it. He's taking the Deion Sanders, Coach Prime view of building a roster from Colorado, bringing in so many new guys, but why not? If you got guys that aren't playing up to your expectation, then at this point with NIL, they are professionals, and it is free agency. And I don't feel terribly bad about it. It's just the way the new college football is, and that's the way it goes. I like it that he's trying to make an impact right now. What I think he'll need to continue to do is build the slow way as well, with high school recruits and making sure the culture is the way he wants it to be. The thing about Vanderbilt, though, is that they're one of the smart guy schools, right? Well, we've seen Northwestern compete at the higher levels of the Big Ten. We've seen Stanford compete at the higher levels of the Pac-12. We've seen Notre Dame compete at the higher levels nationally. We've seen the smart guy schools do stuff. Duke, has had a really good run the last few years. Why not Vanderbilt? And I like it that he is going for broke on this.
Trevor Matich, always appreciate your time and insights. Next time you call in, it will be officially football season when training camp opens up.
Cannot wait. Guys, I appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you, Trevor. Trevor Matich joining us here on Stillman Company, brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics. Always appreciate Trevor. A lot of good stuff there. We will react to it next in our final hour here on Stillman and Company. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, heading into hour number 4 right after this. Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Stillman and company. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today. Ian Safar behind the glass, broadcasting live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Just talked with Trevor Matich. A lot of great stuff from Trevor, talking Titans, SEC football, Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans and what they're up to heading into life post Caleb Williams. If you want to chime in, you can always text or call 615-737-1025. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Reacting to Trevor, I think one of the big takeaways I had from his comments was about T'Vondre Sweat, who is maybe outside of Will Levis, Traylon Burks, L'Jarius Sneed. I think those four probably are going to have the biggest spotlight on them heading into training camp. And the biggest question, first off, for T'Vondre Sweat is, will he be on the field? But I thought Trevor made some good points about what to watch for if he is out there. And can he, through these full-speed drills, is he able to get through them and not need to go take a breather after? His conditioning is going to be crucial to the Titans' defensive success, because if he's not out there past Jeffrey Simmons, that defensive line gets pretty thin pretty quick.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what his ideal playing weight is. Do we have, I know that at the combine, he weighed in at 366 pounds, or at least that's what he's listed as on his prospect page. I'm wondering if he has slimmed down at all over the past several weeks, in addition to being healthy enough to practice. But to Trevor's point, because he missed those practices, he is going to be a little bit behind. It will be interesting to see how quickly he gets up to speed. Because as you said, if T'Vondre Sweat is unavailable and, Jeffrey Simmons is almost on an island, the Titans lost 11 and a half sacks when Danico Autry left for Houston. And T'Vondre Sweat is going to play a role in making up for that lost production. But if he's unavailable, where are the sacks coming from other than Jeffrey Simmons? I mean, can you count on Arden Key to get to the quarterback? Can you count on Harold Landry to get to the quarterback? Sweat is a big part of that defensive line. I mean, that's why it's going to be crucial that he is available. Like, I was thinking to myself as we were coming back from the break, when we heard the intro of the show, and thinking to myself, I almost forgot what Jared sounds like. You think that would be impossible, right? To forget what Jared sounds like, because we hear him 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. But he's been on vacation, and deservedly so, over the past few weeks. And if T'Vondre Sweat is not on the field for the first day of training camp, you're going to tune into this show at 2:00 that day, and you're going to hear someone blowing a gasket.
Yes.
You're going, like, that 2 weeks off for Jared. He's building up that. He's ramping it up himself. He's got to get himself into training camp shape too, vocally. And he's going to blow a gasket. I can promise you that, if T'Vondre Sweat is not on the field when the Titans start training camp. So it's a big deal. I mean, the Titans used a high draft pick on him. As I said earlier, a lot of draft analysts were mixed on the pick. They thought it might have been a reach. Had T'Vondre Sweat been selected, in the late second round, early third round, whatever, I don't think we would be putting as much pressure on him. But it's a key position for the Titans that T'Vondre Sweat is going to fill, and he needs to be available to do it.
Yeah, I think Jared on that, it's that we hope he's on the field so you don't have to worry about it. But I think if T'Vondre Sweat isn't out there for the first practice, Jared will put his Peter Skoronski guard draft rant to shame that day if Sweat's not out there.
I had forgotten about the way he said guard.
A guard!
I wonder if Ian hears certain things that Jared says in his sleep, because he's had to listen to it for almost 10 years.
I do have some type of work nightmare sometimes, but they usually don't involve Jared.
No?
So that's good. Yeah. Mostly involves, being on time for our Preds broadcast or something.
Yeah.
Or not being able to find the button, or missing my mark at exactly 6:00 or something like that.
He elongates certain syllables when he's trying to make a point.
Guru.
Yes.
That's one I like.
Or when
right tackle.
or years. He says that a lot too. So Tavondre Sweat is going to be in Jared's, he's gonna have that vision locked in on Tavondre Sweat, I'm sure. So he better be out there for all of our sakes.
I can't wait to listen if he's not out there, though, which is why Jared's so good at what he does, because I know if he's not out there, lots of Metro Nashville and people in Middle Tennessee will be tuning in to hear exactly what Jared Stillman has to say.
Yes.
Reading this article from Longhorn Country, part of Sports Illustrated, Sweat weighed in at 366 pounds at the combine. He said he played at 365 while winning Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year at Texas this year. So I don't know if they're ever going to reveal what he's actually playing at, but you would think that would be his playing weight if he had such a great season this year at 365. But he's got to be out there. Like you said, Jeffrey Simmons will get so much more attention if there is a Tavondre Sweat-sized hole in the middle of that defensive line. Just the size and presence of Sweat on that line is going to draw double teams.
Yes.
You cannot handle a guy that big one-on-one all the time. So that's going to give Jeffrey Simmons more one-on-one opportunities. It's going to give Harold Landry and Arden Key and others on the edge more one-on-one opportunities. That's why, as I mentioned earlier in the program, TD said the Titans have conditional depth up front, and that condition is whether Sweat is out there, because Sweat, just his size, whether he gets to the quarterback or makes the play or not, just him being out there puts more pressure on an opposing offensive line.
It feels like there's a ripple effect. Like if Tavondre Sweat can't play, it feels like there will be consequences down the defensive line and elsewhere. So, I guess another person you would have to consider in terms of where the sacks are coming from is you hope that Jamal Adams gets a couple of sacks. And
that is true.
And Trevor was excited about the Jamal Adams acquisition. Then again, it's been 3 years since Jamal Adams recorded the sack. So there was a tweet last week that just made me laugh. I think it was the NFL Game Day account said that since 2017, Jamal Adams leads all, defensive backs in sacks. And Mike Herndon of paulkaharski.com said, also of note, he's tied for last in sacks since 2021 or whatever it was, with 0. So, the Jamal Adams of it all is interesting to me. And Big Joe and I were in for Jared last week. We had Teron Davenport on for the TD Power Hour. And listening to Teron talk about expectations for Jamal Adams was interesting. I asked for a baseline. There were many questions for Teron about what should we expect production-wise from Jamal Adams. And Teron, I believe, said somewhere in the 2 to 3 sack range, which would be an improvement over what he's done the past few years.
More than 0.
Right, more than 0. But, his availability is also, the number of injuries that Jamal Adams has dealt with over the past several years. And they've been all different types of injuries. It's not the same injury on top of itself. It's like 4 or 5 separate injuries, some serious, some not so serious. But, if they can get the Jamal, look, I'm not expecting them to get the Jamal Adams that was an all-pro in New York. I'm not expecting that Jamal Adams, or even the Jamal Adams in his first season in Seattle. But if you can get some version of that, like a 60% version of that or a 70% version of that, which might be even asking a lot, considering that he hasn't been available these past few years, that would be a big help, because he's basically playing on a veteran minimum contract. So if you can get some sacks out of him at that rate, at that cost, that would be a boon for the Titans for sure.
And there's a reason he was drafted 6th overall as a safety out of LSU. The talent is still in there. It's whether you can get it out and whether he can be on the field, which I think, as we've seen, is the biggest question. And that hasn't been the case lately for him and a lot of the Titans' other safeties. Amani Hooker struggled with injuries, Elijah Molden as well. The secondary, the cornerbacks are wildly improved. If the safeties can stay healthy, this secondary could be one of the best in football, but that's obviously a very big if as we enter training camp. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to join in on the conversation. We do have one texter on our text line. They're talking about Jared. I saw Dean Pease and thought maybe they were talking about the defense, but no. Dean Pease was Jared's best saying with emphasis. I know our listeners can't wait for Jared to be back. next
Joey
week.
from Bellevue mentions, and this is actually the one, and Ian can. I'm gonna. This is a Jared. This is a Jaredism. Ian, back me up on this. The way that Jared says Pierre LeBrun drives me nuts because Pierre is French, but he's not like cartoonishly French.
Squiggly mustache.
Not like
French.
ha ha ha.
Pepe Le Pew.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not Pepe Le Pew. I mean, he does speak French. He has that tinge, that French accent.
Sure,
but he's not
French Canadian.
He's
A
not
little
like
bit there. Yeah,
Inspector Clouseau or something like that out there.
he takes it next level with the Pierre.
It drives me up the wall. So thanks, Joey and Bellevue, for pointing that out.
615-737-1025. If you want to chime in, text or call our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll take a quick break here. Final hour of the program. And big day yesterday. I celebrated it live on air. College Football 25 was released. First college football video game released in over a decade. We're going to talk about it a little bit. It's a big phenomenon. I don't know if I've seen a video game draw this much chatter on social media and everywhere over the last couple of days. So we're going to talk about that coming up next. I was able to play the game for a while last night, and I'll give you a little review of some of my favorite parts of the game as well. That's up next here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared today in Safar Behind the Glass. 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Going to talk some college football 25 here, the new video game released. First time since 2013 was the last year. It was NCAA Football 14 with Denard Robinson on the cover. Finally, we have a new one. And I had a lot of fun playing it. We'll get to that in a little bit. Before we dive in, we don't know what we opened here with the floodgates. We've got plenty of texters giving their favorite Jaredisms on the text line now. Somebody mentions, and we did this yesterday with Nicholas Petit Frere, a.k.a.
PT.
There we go. That's a good one. What the other one is? Is it Bill Callahan, a.k.a.
Big Coach?
Big Coach. There we go. Yes, those are the two. And then as Keith from Bowling Green points out on our text line, Adam intentionally did one as well, which is when Jared will just go, Ian, back me up on this.
Well, Ian is doing so many other things.
Ian's scrambling back there doing stuff. I always love it's just like, Ian, am I right here? And it's like, yeah, bro.
Sure. Whatever you say.
You're like, you're watching. It's like you're watching TV, zoning out, and your significant other asks you a question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. What you might have been doing last night as you were playing college football 25, and I must say, I used to be a pretty avid gamer when I was younger. I don't have as much time to sit down and play video games anymore. I was never an avid player of the college football franchise because I wasn't a college football fan growing up. But to see the amount, like the hype around this game and the excitement around this game, like I watched all the videos that EA Sports put out, like breaking down like the sights and sounds and Dynasty and Road to Glory or whatever it's called, like the depth to which this game goes. It's scary. Like I remember when it was revolutionary, and people on the text line, I'm hoping you're with me on this. I remember when it was revolutionary in Madden 2003 when they had the debut of EA Tracks. Shout out Andrew WK, Party Hard. That was the first game, I believe, that EA Sports had licensed music, and it changed the game, no pun intended. Like, that was revolutionary. Now I'm looking at all these things that you can do on this game, and it's like, how does anyone have time for this?
No,
like the recruiting and everything like that. It's just like, I want to play the game, but it's more than just playing the game.
That's why it's immersive more than any other sports game, because you have to recruit, and it's like some of the things that you do for recruiting are like DM the player or scroll through their social media. Or
it's like this player wants to transfer because he doesn't get enough brand exposure at your school. I'm like, what? I thought we were just playing a video game.
There was one that one of my friends sent me. I don't think I got this one, but on Road to Glory, a girl will text you and be like, hey, I'm having a party. Do you want to come over at like 7? And you can either decline or go. But if you decline, she blocks you, and you get a message that says you've been blocked by Audrey.
Audrey.
It's like this whole thing. But if you say go, you get penalized by your coach because you get caught out after curfew. It's funny how deep that it goes. And speaking of EA Tracks, the soundtrack in this game, it's all marching band. Like there's no like songs that you would know from radio or anything like that. And it was recorded right here in Nashville.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, like the detail, the attention to detail, because they've been working on this game for a long time. The attention to detail that was put into the stadiums and the intros, like, Bevo and the Buffalo in Colorado looks like an actual, it looks like the real thing. Like,
does he try to fight Uga? Like in real life?
He does not try to fight Uga, but I remember that. Like, I remember, one of the things they showed in the preview video was they were talking about the sights and sounds. And I think they recreated the delay of game that was at Michigan got at Penn State.
Yes. Yeah. Where Swag Surfing was playing.
Yeah. Like, that was pretty cool. Like, I love that attention to detail, but watching these videos about this game and all the things you can do, it's just like, how much time are you spending actually playing football? And how much time are you like, I gotta recruit. I gotta build my program. I gotta text this recruit. I know that some of that is part of the fun. But like in the amount of time you played last night, how much actual football did you play?
Let's see. I think I was on there for probably 4 hours total. I played right off the top. I just played a game. Like I just jumped into Play Now.
And who'd you play?
I was Virginia Tech. I had to see Enter Sandman.
Well, I saw that it wasn't in Enter Sandman because I couldn't get the rights for it, but it was like a similar song.
It sounds
like a similar,
really close.
Yeah, a similar like original composition.
And they've got the jumping going on. It's pretty well done. I played that game. I realized that defense is very hard. I think I lost. I scored like 42 points.
Who'd you play against?
Arkansas.
Okay.
I picked like a decent team, but not a great team. I lost like 52-42 or something like that. So shootout. But
no beamer ball over there.
I think I played a total of 4 games in like 4 hours. So did not play a ton. But there was a lot of recruiting that went down. In one of my, I have 2 dynasties, one with one of my friends, one just by myself. And Minnesota's going hard after a 5-star quarterback. I'm telling you that. So
the key is you want to pick a program that needs to be built versus maintaining a top program.
Yes. And see, what I love about it too is in Dynasty, it's not like Madden where like you pick your team and you are that team for 30 years. Or no one gets to 30 years, but you can do it for 30 years. But there's the coaching carousel. So right now, my other dynasty, I'm the offensive coordinator at Wyoming. But let's say maybe Middle Tennessee State comes calling with a head coaching job next year. I could go take that and come down to Murfreesboro and then maybe go be a Power 5 offensive coordinator. So it is immersive. There's so many different things you can do. And it is funny. Like you mentioned, it's not all about playing the game. Like if you're playing like play an NHL video game, you're not doing a ton off the ice. Like maybe in your career mode, there's a few like cut scenes where you talk to a reporter or something like that, but you're not going out and recruiting. Like it is cool how much extra that they have built onto it. And I think that's why so many people are excited about it.
I would love I'm sure plenty of our listeners have also partaken in the game. Now you paid the extra to play it early.
Yes.
So the game itself doesn't come out until Friday?
Yes.
So how much more did you pay to be able to play now?
$30. So the game is $70. The deluxe edition with the 3-day early access was $100, which I was happy to pay after waiting a decade for this game.
Fair.
But I noted a tweet. 700,000 people were playing online last night, just online. So that doesn't include anybody who's just playing on their own. And that's just the early access. Like anybody who bought this game early was on there last night, which makes sense, obviously. But I would say millions, at least like 1.5 million people were probably online playing this game last night. And that doesn't include the general public who still doesn't have access to it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the days of walking into GameStop and no one checking my ID when I wanted to buy Grand Theft Auto 3. Those were the days when I was playing video games. Probably not the smart thing to let like a 14-year-old play Grand Theft Auto 3. I turned out okay, but they didn't check. I don't think they never checked. But I remember how, like I said, it was revolutionary. In 2003, 2004, when I was playing Madden and like the things you could do there. But yeah, this game feels like it might be a little bit over my head. Like the microtransactions and such.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's overwhelming. But as you said, it's been a decade and people are clearly excited. And as I was saying, I'm sure we have listeners who played last night. And if you did, and you have, if you want to share your review or anything fun you did, if you got the early edition, call us, text us 615-737-1025. I would love to hear it. As a gamer, as a longtime gamer, it's really cool to see people so excited about a game. But just reading about how like micro you can get into these things, it feels like I'm past that. I feel like I'm too old for it.
I don't think I could do that. It feels too much. But
I've been waiting for this game for like since they announced it, which was like 3.5 years ago. I've been waiting for this day to finally have it, and it didn't feel real last night to get it. Like it felt like a dream. So I have 2 funny stories from the game last night that shows you kind of how in depth the game goes, gameplay wise, not outside. So like on the field, there were two pretty funny things that happened in my games last night. So we'll get to that next. And if you have anything that you want to chime in with from the new college football video game, text or call 615-737-1025. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan, in for Jared today. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. Final half hour, Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman. We'll be back in tomorrow, 2 to 6. A lot of fun stuff planned for tomorrow's show as well. Hope you'll join us. Talking the college football video game that was released yesterday. And again, if you have any stories from playing, if you got the early access, let us know. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I do have a couple of funny stories of gameplay from last night that kind of shows you how deep they went into this game. The first thing I will say is this game is very difficult. On 2014, I remember I used to play Heisman level difficulty, the highest level difficulty, and I could get by. It was competitive. It was fun. I played All-American last night, and it is hard.
What level is that like?
That's like the second one. So I think it's like Heisman, All-American, varsity,
JV
rookie,
or
something like that.
Okay.
It is very difficult. Defense is hard. I'm throwing more picks than I know what to do with.
Apparently, kicking is very hard.
That is where I was going. So they wanted to make kicking harder because college kickers aren't as good as NFL kickers. Makes sense. College kickers is, it's a tweet that gets sent out probably once a weekend when a kicker misses an easy field goal. College kickers.
It can be rough.
It is. And I'm telling you, if you haven't seen some people try and kick a field goal in this game, go find it on social media because it is hilarious. The amount of times I kicked it over the sideline and into the stands, like aiming towards the goalpost, and I kicked it like 70 degrees left, and it landed in the third row of seats over the sideline. It happened at least 3 times last night.
Well, isn't it because you have to account for accuracy and power? Like there's 2 different bars you have to match up or something?
It's like you hit a button to stop it for accuracy, and then you have to hold it for power. But it's not like previous games where it doesn't matter how long it goes. Like if you're at the top, you're at the top. If you go too far, you'll overkick it and duck hook it left. So kicking is hard, and I love it. It's the realism of college kickers aren't good all the time, very often at all. So it makes it a little bit more realistic to make it a lot harder to kick. Extra points, you'll make most of them. Field goals, if I get anywhere outside of like a 35-yard field goal, I'm going for it. Doesn't matter the distance at this point. Maybe I'll get better at it. But the funniest thing that happened last night to me, and it has to do with the atmosphere that they've put in. They've tried to make these home atmospheres realistic and make it really tough to play in these hard environments. So I did the Road to Glory, which is like the career mode. I was a quarterback. I decided to be a 3-star. Didn't want to start at the top and have everything handed to me. So I was the 3rd string quarterback at Vanderbilt for most of the year. And I'm just playing my practices, trying to gain coach trust, all this. And I finally challenged the backup quarterback, and I win the backup spot. And this is in the second to last game of the year. I'm now the backup for the first time. Vandy's playing at LSU. And so I was like, you know what? I'll jump into the game. Maybe the quarterback gets injured or something, or maybe it's a blowout and I'll get in. First play of the game, the starting quarterback tears his Achilles. And I jump in there, and I swear it was like I was out there playing quarterback. So I jump in, I pick my first play, and all of the routes start going in different directions. I can't see what button each receiver is. So I snap the ball. I thought my running back was one of the buttons. It wasn't. I threw it to a receiver and threw a pick 6. First play of the game. Come out the next drive, throw a pick on the second play. I threw 6 picks in that game. And I was like, well, the atmosphere is very realistic in Death Valley, because that's kind of how I imagine it would feel for an 18-year-old who just became the backup quarterback to step in unexpectedly and play in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. Yeah, I saw that one of the things in the game when you're on the road is that the route trees get all jumbled, and you know this field is shaking. And no, I mean, look, it's awesome that you know the amount of realism in these games is something to behold, and it's been like that for a while. But especially with the care that EA Sports took with this game, like even as someone who just said that it's probably too complicated for me to play at this point, I am one of those nerds, I'm not afraid to say it, who like when he has some downtime will like watch speed runs. Like, are you aware of this? Like
Yes,
where
yeah,
like someone will like a gamer will play a game and see how fast they can complete it.
yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, I'm bored. I'll watch a speed run of some Mario game I used to play. Like I'm fine with that. I mean, at this point, you'll take entertainment any way you can get it. But I was big on Madden for a long time in the early aughts, especially. I think the last, I played a lot of the NHL games, obviously. But I mean, like I'm talking about like NFL Blitz.
Yeah.
Like those are the types of games I was playing when I was younger, which were the opposite of realistic. They were meant to be cartoonish. That was part of the fun. Whenever I go to an arcade type bar or something that has a cabinet for NFL Blitz, I get really excited. Because I played that game on Nintendo 64, which was, in my opinion, one of the better consoles there ever
I
has
had
been.
a Nintendo 64.
Great console.
That was the first. I think that was the first console I had, and then went to the GameCube after that.
Well, I mean, GoldenEye is just a classic.
Yes.
For 64.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if I had that one.
A lot of
No,
birthday.
GoldenEye was probably the biggest one back in the
Really?
day.
Yeah,
Oh,
that was GoldenEye was maybe the biggest game released on Nintendo 64. A lot of birthday parties growing up playing multiplayer mode.
Oh, yeah.
On GoldenEye 64.
For sure.
I remember the first time I played Halo on the original Xbox. I've always been really bad at first person shooters.
Me too. That's never been my thing.
Never been good. But it's great to see people who haven't really been in, like, because I saw that it's only available in like the latest iteration of PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah.
So if you don't have those systems, you have to buy them in order to play this game.
And there are people who are doing that.
Yeah.
People are going out.
And that's quite the investment. I mean, those systems are not cheap.
$500, $600 somewhere in there. Plus the game, which if you went early access, it's $100. So no, I even though as I'm talking about the game, I'm proving to everyone that I'm not very good at this game yet. It's very different from Madden, by the way. Like I consider myself, at least in high school, I played a good amount of Madden. I was a pretty decent Madden player. If I played my friends, I usually beat them. I'm not good at this game yet. And I think it'll be a while before I'm good, but it's so much fun. The presentation is great. All of the recruiting stuff and the dynasty is awesome. So I'm a big fan, and I do recommend if you are a fan of college football, I recommend you get on there. You can text or call if you have any thoughts on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com right now. We have Graham wanting to chime in. Graham, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since we've had the college football game. What game I really miss is NFL Street.
I almost mentioned that when Adam was talking NFL Blitz. I loved NFL Street going up.
That was like my, you invite your friends over, have Mountain Dew, all sitting on the couch just playing against each other. I really miss that. And I miss the Burnout series. This is kind of like seeing how the hype is for this game. Maybe, some of these dead games that were once, top of their game, they might see they need to come back with them.
Thank you for the call, Graham. Yeah, NFL Street was a fun one. It was kind of, I think it was kind of like NFL Blitz or like. I
was into NBA Street.
Yes, NBA Street was fun too. Yeah, those street games where it's just like, it's not realistic, but it's a lot of fun.
Still a sports game.
And I know NBA 2K is kind of like, it's not the same, obviously. It's much more realistic, but they do the blacktop in their games and stuff like that where you can play pickup, but not the same. NBA Street, NFL Street, those were really fun games. Thank you for the call, Graham. Talking video games here as the college football video game was released, at least to early access last night. Ton of fun. I recommend if you're a fan of college football to get it and play around with it a little bit. One more segment on the show here today. We'll wrap it up. We got the All-Star game coming up down in Arlington, MLB All-Star game tonight. We'll chat a little bit about that and wrap up the show when we come back. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Wrapping up the show here on Stillman and Company, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan in for Jared Stillman today and tomorrow. We'll be back 2 to 6 right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. I'm talking video games for the last half hour. Again, the much-awaited college football video game was released yesterday, 3 p.m. Central Time for the early access. It will get its official release coming up on Friday. A few people chiming in. Our friend producer Bo in Franklin says he's loving the game. He said he joined a competitive SEC dynasty playing with Kentucky. They're fighting Connor Newts. Randy talking about the metal vibrating football game. I'm not really sure what that is. I guess it was not a video game, but some sort of.
It wasn't a board
like a
game.
board
It's
type
like a
game?
tabletop game of some kind. I mean, that's even old for I'm too young for that. But I was thinking about my favorite. Like it's crazy to think how video games play such an integral part in a lot of people's lives, and memories are formed by playing them. And I'll always remember when I was in middle school, I had to have been in either 7th or 8th grade, and I was playing with my friend Cameron in Madden. I was the Eagles, he was the Buccaneers, and he scored a touchdown with like between 10 and 15 seconds left on the clock. And after he kicked the extra point, he was up by 4 points. So I needed to score a touchdown to win. So he kicks the ball off. I have a modest return, but I really have one shot at this. And at this point, it's the Eagles probably. It's like the Donovan McNabb Eagles probably. So I just throw one ball up there. I'm trying to think of who the receiver would have been. It may have been like James Thrash. This is how far back we're going. But I'm down 4, less than 10 seconds left. I need a miracle. I throw the ball. The Buccaneers DB deflects the pass. The receiver catches it, takes the defensive back out of the play, and I run the length of the field for a touchdown as time expires to win the game. And Cameron was so mad. He put his controller on the ground. It was a PlayStation 2. He put his controller on the ground, stomped it right down the middle, and threw it out the window. Like that's how serious people took these games and still do.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I sometimes I see this Madden Bowl thing where they have the professional gamers play for all the money, and they take that stuff seriously, man. But I just remember my classmate in 7th or 8th grade being so upset that I won a video game that he crushed this controller and tossed it out the window.
I mean, having played the new game, I bet there's some controllers and TV screens this morning after last night.
I'm sure everybody knows at least of one story
of
a friend or yourself that something happened in a game and you just absolutely lost it. Like I remember a friend in college, they would just crushing Gran Turismo on PS2, the old racing game. It was very realistic.
Yes.
Sometimes it would take forever. Something happened with the save process and it didn't save, and it went absolutely ballistic.
I mean, as kids, sometimes it felt like that was the most important thing in the world at that moment, was whether you won that game or not.
Yes.
Or whether the game saved and you lost all your progress like that. That's the worst thing in the world that could happen to you. Yeah, cool stuff. Glad that we've got people chiming in. Randy sent a video link about metal vibrating football. I have to check that out after we get off the air here. We got about 3 minutes. MLB All-Star Game coming up next. Adam, quickly, are you an All-Star Game guy like in any sport? Yeah.
No.
I'm not either.
No, I'm not an All-Star.
It doesn't move the needle for me.
No, I like it, when the leagues switch things up, like when the NHL went to 3-on-3 for the first time. It was here in Nashville in 2016. So that was cool, but that's kind of lost its luster. This year, the NHL this season, they're not doing an All-Star game. They're doing the 4 nations face-off. They're doing a best-on-best tournament, mini tournament, which will be fun. So I'll watch that.
And that's interesting, at least. Like, it gives you a reason to tune in.
I think it's the United States, Canada, Sweden, and Finland are the 4 teams.
Awesome.
And so it'll be fun. It's as a prelude to the Olympics. So that'll be fun. But yeah, what's funny is I saw you mentioned this to me, that the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, the teams are actually going to wear league jerseys.
That's what it looks like. I think they've done that for the last 2 years.
Okay, because I remember I thought it was always odd as a casual baseball observer that the players in the All-Star game, the actual game, wore their normal jerseys and wore the league jerseys during the home run derby.
Yes.
I feel like it should have been the other way around.
And now it is the other way around. Like Bobby Witt, they were just showing highlights of the home run derby last night. He was in his full Royals getup, but I think they are wearing the American and National League uniforms.
And apparently
today.
they're not good.
I did not like them. I haven't seen like a full like picture of it, but I saw them flash on the TV quickly and they looked pretty hideous.
I'm not sure I like the hats. The hats were kind of out.
I'll have to get a closer look.
But I wasn't super thrilled with the hat.
Well, I know if I'm going to tune in at all to the All-Star game, it will be for the bottom of the first inning when Paul Skeens faces Gunnar Henderson, Juan Soto, and Aaron Judge. Outside of that, and I probably will, I'll watch the bottom of the first, top of the second, so I can see my Detroit Tiger Tarek Skubal pitch. But that's probably about it. Especially, we talked about this yesterday. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It used to decide home field advantage in the World Series. Anymore? It does not matter anymore.
Yeah, then what's the point? Who cares? I'm kidding. I mean, people do care.
I mean, I think the star power this year gives you a reason to tune in. So Paul Skeens, Corbin Burns starting for the AL and the NL. You can listen to it right here on The Game. Coming up right now, Jake Lyman, Adam Vingan signing off here, filling in for Jared Stillman. We'll be back tomorrow, 2 to 6. We will talk to you then. Plenty of talk about Titans training camp, more SEC Media Day coverage, and the Predators. We'll have that for you tomorrow right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.